Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 870 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And the cult of Matt has survived the Chipotle schism, thankfully. And thank you all for the great wishes. And also, stuff is crashing all over Russia, and we have some very big news today. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we are going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and we have absolutely major news on every single level. From the battlefields of Ukraine, where we were able to see the heavy firefights were occurring today in the area of Vovchansk on film, and all the way up into the Russian Federation itself, where we got breaking news that a Russian Superjet has ended up crashing significantly near to the city of Kolomna, just south of Moscow. On top of that, we've also been able to get other breaking news from the United States. We've been able to hear that Ukraine has requested to be able to use U.S. weapons deep inside the Russian Federation, and that request has been denied for a third time openly and publicly. We were also able to get additional news that apparently the Russians are planning on conducting a major false flag in the area just north of Kyiv on the dam that holds back the entire river reservoir of the Dnipro just north of the city, which is called the Sea of Kyiv. We have a load of news to be covering just over this past 24 hours, but before we get into all of that, we do have to address a short little update on how we're doing behind the scenes. As many of y'all will know, that yesterday's stream was one of the shortest that has ever run in recent channel history, at about an hour and a half long. Usually, streams are about 3.5 hours long, meaning that that one was greatly reduced in time, and many of y'all heard that we were not feeling that well as of last night. Today, both Matthew and me feel perfectly fine. I do not have a headache, I do not feel hot, I feel A-okay, and Matthew is feeling A-okay as well. Matthew was poisoned by the Chipotle. I don't know what happened to me, but I just felt terrible, and so we had to end up cutting it out early. But that won't be happening tonight, as we're going to be covering.
I'm telling you what, that was like the fight for my life last night. It was a rough night last night. I tell you what, I will never eat there again. If that's what caused it, I'll never touch it again. I have a feeling that's what it was, but man, I fought that battle valiantly. I got through it, and the Chipotle gate is now over.
I was actually walking by Matthew's room the other day after the stream ended, and I heard him in there. He was going, I'm fighting for my freaking life. And I was like, oh, dang, he's got it rough in there. But nevertheless, just want y'all to get a little bit of an update on that. Know we're A-okay. Know we're all good. And tonight's stream is going to go forward like every other one has in the past. We're going to be running a full-length show as usual. Probably about 3 hours long, maybe 3.5 hours long. So sit back, relax, because there's a lot ahead, and we have loads of news to cover. And I'm going to be taking y'all over to our Twitter. This is actually deliberately being done so that way we can plug that Twitter. Link in the description below if you want to go join us over there. You know, some people may not like Twitter, some people do. It doesn't really matter. You know, maybe if you want to join, you can. But nevertheless, we were able to repost this on Twitter. And according to major information that we have at the moment, Russia has accused Ukraine of planning a false flag destruction of the Kyiv hydroelectric power plant and the Kyiv reservoir, otherwise known as the Sea of Kyiv. And Ukraine has outright rejected these conspiracies. This is something that is wildly concerning to us because this is the exact same thing that the Russian Federation started to do before they destroyed the dam down at Novokakhovka way back. I believe it was in the early part of June in 2023, around last year. And it was one of the largest humanitarian crises that has ever been seen on the face of the continent of Europe since World War II, after the dam ruptured and the waters of that reservoir flowed out through the rest of the Dnipro River and into other major cities like Kherson, practically flooding a large majority of it. We are starting to hear that the Russians are making the exact same claim about the Kyiv hydroelectric power plant, which is this one that is right here. Now, we are, of course, under the assumption that the Russian Federation may end up trying to conduct some sort of a missile or drone attack, or possibly some form of sabotage against the dam, destroying it and releasing massive amounts of floodwaters from the Sea of Kyiv, just north of the city of Kyiv right here, there's the size of it, and straight onto the capital city itself. This is a major development because we do not know if the Russians actually are going to follow through on this. This is once again the same kind of misinformation campaign that was conducted right before the Russians blew up the Novokakhovka dam, so it is highly possible that they could be doing the same misinformation campaign before conducting a strike or a sabotage attempt on this dam in the present day. And a lot of people have been led to believe that this could be a wildly concerning thing, and it really could be. The dam is actually facing slightly south and west, meaning that the floodwaters would rapidly surge forward and over the western banks of the Dnipro River, meaning that they would flood over into Obolon. They would also flood over into the historic central area of Kyiv, and also pretty much all of the governmental administration buildings, as all governmental administration buildings of Ukraine in the city of Kyiv are all on its western side, meaning that this entire area may be subjected to heavy flooding, and government buildings, government facilities, and government information and archives may be completely flooded out, meaning that the Russians will be able to get a short-term command advantage on the Ukrainian front lines and possibly deal with the Ukrainian confusion, leading them to have a short span advantage on the front lines. A lot of people have continuously been talking about this and wondering when the world could come up out of something like this, and we're not entirely sure, but nevertheless, I think a question will be asked of y'all here in a second on what y'all think about it. But moving on from this large and breaking news, we were also able to get some fairly significant news out of the Russian Federation that is showing that the continued decline and collapse of the Russian Federation is still ongoing in the background, although it's something that we only get a little litmus test on here and there. But this litmus test was probably one of the best ones that we've been able to get so far. Near to the city of Kolomna, a major incident happened today involving one of Russia's newest commercial aircraft, and this is something that we have to cover a great deal because while it's not directly related to the war effort itself, it is showing the kind of strain that the Russian Federation has been under for some time now. Many of y'all may actually know the city of Kolomna because it's been brought up several times on this channel before. Kolomna is actually the home to a large amount of Russian heavy industry, and not only that, to several design bureaus that have been targeted and attacked over the course of the war, on top of several other major war industry facilities that have been hit and destroyed by Ukrainian drones. This city has ended up making the headlines on this channel many, many times. And it actually is considered, by no means, and I'm not kidding about this, a hood of Moscow. It is incredibly far south, and it's not really in the Moscow metropolitan area, but it's considered to be a part of the greater Moscow area, just right outside of one of the last ring roads. You can actually see the largest ring road right out here. It's an incomplete one. This one right here, I forgot the name, the A108, is actually the farthest out existent ring road outside of Moscow. But Kolomna is not that far away from the very southern tip of it. But the city of Kolomna wasn't necessarily what was the big deal today. It was actually what happened right outside of Kolomna. And this requires me to show y'all a picture of one of Russia's most advanced jets that they currently use in the civilian world nowadays. And let me go get the, let's see, the Sukhoi 100 Superjet, because I typed in Su-100 and then it pulled up a World War II era tank destroyer, and that's not what we want. We want the other Su-100, which is right here. This is the Sukhoi Superjet 100, and the Sukhoi Superjet 100 is one of the most cutting-edge and advanced passenger aircrafts that the Russian Federation was beginning to manufacture before the war in Ukraine began. These have not really succeeded in foreign markets, considering that Russian safety standards are far lower and far more relaxed than US or European safety standards, and therefore many airlines decided to opt out on purchasing these and instead decided to buy more conventional aircraft, much more commonly seen here in the West, like the A319 and the A320, both provided by Airbus, or to buy more 737s, some of those actually being the 737 MAX, which many of y'all may have heard about in recent news and goings-on outside of this channel, but nevertheless, we don't cover that a lot here because we don't want to end up dead one morning. But nevertheless...
Don't want to get on the spicy plane boat. But also, real quick, I had a question about the Superjet. Who makes the engines on this thing? Because, you know, are they making their own engines in-house, or are they getting them from someone else?
Everything on the Sukhoi Superjet 100, from what we understand, is actually made in-house. Technically. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the aviation components are actually manufactured inside of Russia. It may just mean that the entire aircraft is assembled inside of the Russian Federation, but I think that some of the engine components may be coming from the West. And let's see if we can find out some of the different kinds of power plants that they have on the Superjet. So, let's see here. Let's see, divestment of the Superjet design. Let's see.
A SAM 146 turbo fan, it looks like.
Let's see. So it's actually a joint venture, interestingly enough, in between France and Russia. Now we can see where the point of failure was, because This is a very let me just make sure to read this so that way we can get this correct. The Powerjet SAM-146 is a turbofan engine produced by the Powerjet joint venture in between let's see, S-Necma of France and MPO Saturn of Russia, developing a 68 to 80 kilonewton of thrust. The SAM-146 is used exclusively on the Superjet 100s made by Sukhoi. So this is a joint French-Russian venture to produce these engines that keep these Superjets in the air and flying, and that is something very
That's kind of
important.
interesting. Like, and also, I noticed it said it was developed from a CFM engine, which is obviously not Russian, I don't think. So it's kind of weird. I was looking at the engines, I was thinking, like, surely they didn't make these engines on their own because Russia doesn't really have that kind of capability for like a new jet like that. So that makes a lot of sense. They're relying on France and also other manufacturers as well.
Yeah, and interesting. Also, one thing that's very interesting about this is that the CFM-56 has been used on really a lot of the smaller fleets of aircraft out there. Really, the two backbones of the Western world, the A320 family as a whole, including the A319, and I believe it's like the A321 Neo. I think that's the most advanced version of the A320 family. The A340, which also uses the same size engines, although it's a larger body aircraft, or a wide body, and then you have the 737s, and then the 737 next generations. So it has actually been used on an excessively large amount, well, this is kind of general design, on a lot of Western aircraft. And so this engine right here, the SAM-146, is very similar in design and also requirements as many Western engines on an A320 or in a Boeing 737 would be. Problem is, many of y'all know, the French and the Russians really aren't on good terms anymore, specifically because of the war in Ukraine. And these superjets have started to suffer greatly because of it. Really, the entire Russian aviation industry has suffered massively because of Western sanctions. Unlike other economic categories where there has been a little bit of an ebb and a flow in the kind of impact or real damage that is caused, the Russian aviation industry has suffered significantly. Aviation parts are fairly expensive and quite few in number compared to the overall number of other kinds of goods and products that are traveling around the world at any given point. And therefore, the regulations and the export restrictions on them can be a lot more severe, meaning that the Russians really do not get a large amount of Western aviation components at all unless they're sourcing them through some kind of a shell company or the black market, meaning that there's not really a large amount of them that ever enter the Russian Federation through the entirety of the war. And this is finally starting to show. We were able to see that a Sukhoi Superjet 100, once again, one of the newest and most advanced jets of the Russian Federation, ended up having a complete engine failure in flight today. Both engines cut out entirely, and the Superjet literally just fell to the ground, almost like it was a rock after the engines went out. We don't know why in the world the pilots, because from what we understand, it wasn't a fully laden plane. It only had 3 crew members on board, all of them being pilots. We don't know why they didn't try and glide it anywhere, but once the engines went out, this thing literally just fell like a stone. You can see it right there, slamming dead into the ground.
Damn. Can you back that up and let's see that one more time? And that is wild. It's like it stalled and just like fell out of the sky.
You know what it looks like to me, and I would suspect this is probably going to be the case if they ever launch an investigation and publicly speak about this. The engines went out, and so the pilots got some kind of a warning. They may have thought it was a stall warning instead of an engine failure warning, and so they pulled back really hard on the stick trying to gain altitude or something possibly. They ended up stalling the plane, and it went into maybe a flat spin, and then they tried to recover from the flat spin by putting it into a dive, and by the time that they had actually gotten the aircraft into a dive, because we look at this footage, you can see a little bit the main wing spars, so we can see this thing is pretty much diving straight on headlong into the ground. By the time they actually got it into a dive out of a flat spin to try and recover, it was already too low to the ground and the aircraft was going to crash. But there it is, slamming into the ground, turning into a massive fireball immediately. And the aircraft, of course, was completely broken up on impact.
I assume that nobody made it out of that, I'm assuming.
Oh, no one made it out of that. All 3 members of the flight were killed. And also, CM said stall recover. Go ahead.
I think you got a good theory though, because the way it fell out of the sky like that, like every airplane has enough momentum to sort of glide for a little while. Like they eventually lose momentum and they fall out of the sky, but they don't fall out of the sky immediately. So what they probably did was it did stall, and then they pulled up, and then it just plummeted.
Yeah, I would, and also CM said, that's not stall procedure. That isn't stall procedure. It may have been something. Now, here's what I believe may have happened, and this is something I think is possible. Is that the pilots had the aircraft on autopilot most likely. We don't know the flight path of it or anything. I'm taking all of this and making a huge guess on it. But they had it on autopilot. The engines cut out, and maybe an alarm didn't go off immediately when the engines failed. And so the pilots are just sitting there relaxing, just pretty much sitting there really doing nothing until finally the aircraft starts to veer downwards. The autopilot really can't adjust for their loss of airspeed anymore, and it begins to dive a little bit. An alarm finally maybe starts going off for an engine failure. So without really looking, and they're just kind of quickly reacting in a knee-jerk reaction to the alarm going off, and seeing that the aircraft is starting to tilt downwards, they may be thinking that the autopilot is turned off and they need to try and recover altitude. So they pull back on the stick. The aircraft is already almost in a stall. So at that point, they're putting the aircraft into a flat spin. Aircraft starts going into a flat spin. They try and recover that by pushing the nose down and then just trying to work with the rudder after that to stabilize the aircraft and then pull it out of the flat spin. And by the time they correct the flat spin, they're pretty much looking straight at the ground, and there's absolutely no way to pull out of the dive, and so they end up colliding straight on with the ground. That's what I would assume probably happened. That's a lot of assumptions, by the way, so take that with a grain of salt, but that would be my running theory on why this crash happened. But nevertheless, it happened because of a total engine failure, according to what we're being told at the moment. And so as that smoke plume rises, I'm actually going to move you all on into our next clip here, where we got to see the wreckage, or really the debris field, from the Sukhoi Superjet 100 running right into the middle of a freaking field, or really more so of a forest. So here's the crash site of the Su-100, as seen just about a few hours later. Getting flashbacks of when the president of Iran's helicopter rammed into the side of that mountain right here, but here's the clip. And it hit
a very hard landing, man. This was not soft whatsoever. You know, that's how the Russians always say this. It's eternal flight, brothers. Fuel up and hard landing.
But you know what's crazy is that the plane hit so hard, there isn't even really anything left of it down there. You can see the char from where the fuel burned the trees nearby in that flash off, but there's almost nothing of the plane left down there. I mean, that's bizarre.
My guess is they'll probably never find the black boxes, because I heard they're looking for them, and if they find them, they'll probably try to cover it up, because there's probably an engine problem or something wrong with their design that caused it to do that, or just pilot incompetence, and they don't want that embarrassment on one of their newest jets.
Yeah, they really don't. And also, if y'all are wondering, that has happened a lot in the past before. Back in the Soviet Union, there was actually a major incident that happened near a small town called Uchkaduk in Kazakhstan. And, well, actually, let me make sure that I got that correct. Let's see. Uchkaduk. There we go. And so, actually, it's in Uzbekistan, correction. But Uchkaduk, that is such a hard name to say. Uchkaduk is a small town inside of Uzbekistan, and a Soviet aircraft that had taken off from nearby, I believe it was Ashgabat, if I'm correct, if Google Maps wants to work with me tonight. And so let me see. I think it was Ashgabat or somewhere around the area. The aircraft had taken off. It was flying over this area. They ended up going into a crash because the pilots were exhausted. And so they crashed nearby and everyone got killed. And the Soviet government pretty much just covered up the entire incident and made it sound like nothing really happened because they didn't want to make the general public fearful of flying in the Soviet Union. This happened around 1985 or so when this crash occurred near Uchkaduk, but nevertheless, this has happened before, and we would have a good reason to believe that the Russian Federation will probably say something like, we will launch a full investigation into this, and then just cover it up immediately right afterwards. But still, it is a major incident, and is once again showing that the Russians economically are doing quite poorly, and not only that, the sanctions are starting to have a massive impact. Russian aviation infrastructure is grinding to a halt. There's almost no repair parts for any of their running air fleet. There's almost no ability to keep anything running aviation-wise. And on top of that, fuel is once again being drained at an unbelievable speed compared to the amount of production that the Russians are able to bring forward every single day. And so going off of this, it is once again showing us that the Russian economy is in a dire strait and things are continuously going down the tubes. We are assuming that a large part of the Russian civil aviation fleet is probably in dire state of repairs, and that air accidents like these will continue to be quite common moving later on into the future, probably towards the end of this year. But moving on from that little bit of news, it's time for us to circle back really quickly and up into Kyiv, as many of us have been talking about the possibility of the Russians conducting a false flag attack on the Kyiv hydroelectric power plant that is just north of the city of Kyiv, which could be a major humanitarian crisis, and not only that, a crime against humanity if the Russians were to actually try and conduct some sort of an explosion on that dam in an attempt to destroy its floodgates or to destroy the dam structure itself. And a lot of people have been wondering, are they really going to try and do that? Are the Russians trying to hide their own attack on the dam that's going to be coming up in the future by claiming the Ukrainians are going to do it and therefore it's a false flag? Or are they just trying to fill the Ukrainian public with a great deal of fear that their own government is going to end up drowning them inside the city of Kyiv? What are the Russians really planning by this? And a lot of y'all have put in y'all's input. Matthew, I know that you have a pretty interesting opinion on this as well. And so what are people saying about this? And what are you thinking about it?
All right, so on the question of the Kyiv dam potentially being destroyed by Russia, because recall, this is the very similar chain of events that preceded Russia's destruction of the Novokakhovka dam a while back. They went out and said, oh look, Ukraine's going to do a false flag on it, and then say the Russians did it. And they tried to frame it like Ukraine did it, when in actuality, Russia was planning the entire time to hit that dam, and that's exactly what they did. So this is looking pretty similar. But 75% said yes, Russia is preparing to do it, while 13% said, maybe so, but it's likely lies by Russia, and 3% said no, Russia truly believes it will be a false flag by Ukraine. And for me personally, I'm definitely with the 75%. It sounds like Russia is at least putting the framework into motion to be able to pull off some type of attack on that dam, which is crucial. That dam, the Kyiv dam, is very crucial to Ukraine. So if it is hit, there is definitely going to be a lot of collateral damage from it. And I'm sure that has Ukraine a bit worried because this does follow that exact same pattern as before. But I'm with the 75%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm also with the 75%. I do believe that the Russians are probably preparing to conduct a false flag attack on that dam. Now, there is a lot of reason to believe that something this severe could be coming around the corner here soon, because back in the day, once again, to remind everyone of the Novokakhovka story, which is very distant actually in public memory, because while it was only just about a year and a month ago, so much has happened since then. A lot of people have really forgotten about the Dnipro dam attack, or really more so the Novokakhovka dam attack that the Russians conducted. The Russians leading up to that attack said that the Ukrainians were planning on blowing up the dam and destroying it so that way they could try and flood the southern area and kill a whole bunch of Russians that are around the area of the Dnipro River. They said that time and time again, and then Zelenskyy began to warn that this was some sort of a idea or a psyop that was being conducted by the Russians to make it look like when the Russians blow up the dam, it was actually Ukraine that did it, because Russia had been saying it for so long. And then finally, the dam blew up. The problem is that the Russian story that the Ukrainians were going to blow up the dam was entirely unbelievable, because at the moment, both sides of the dam were being controlled by the Russian Federation. And so it's not really like the Ukrainians had very easy access to just go and plant bombs all over the dam and blow it up, because literally the Russians were on every single part of the dam from both sides. The dam, of course, then blew up, and the entire reservoir that you see here on satellite picture emptied out into the river below. Well, really the Dnipro River further south and into the city of Kherson. And it was a major incident. Now we're seeing that the Russian Federation is doing the exact same thing north of Kyiv, and they are starting to begin the same rhetoric that any day now Ukraine is going to try and blow up that dam and conduct a false flag attack on their own people, so that way they can try and justify some further action against the Russians. The issue with that, however, is what further action could the Ukrainians take against the Russians that they're not already taking? To be entirely honest, Ukraine is doing everything within their powers currently to fight the Russians. There's nothing more that they could do. It's not like if there's a false flag attack and Ukraine goes, this is an atrocity, many of our people drowned, we're going to nuke them. Like, they don't have nuclear weapons. What could they do? What would be the point of conducting a false flag that would inflict massive damage on their capital city and end up causing a large deal of suffering and tie up a lot of Ukrainian time and resources, having to deal with wounded citizens, dead citizens, and not only that, having to try and recover from the damage as well? What kind of benefit would that pose Ukraine? This is not like they could use that attack to justify any more further or serious actions against the Russian Federation, because they are truly doing everything they can right now against Russia, and there's not anything else that they could do extra. Literally nothing. And so I would say that the idea of Ukraine conducting a false flag would make absolutely no sense, as there's nothing for Ukraine to gain from it. There's only plenty to lose from it. And if anyone would conduct a false flag attack and get any benefit from it in the area, it would be the Russian Federation. If Russia hit that dam, once again, like I was saying a moment ago, Ukraine is going to have to be the one dedicating a lot of time and resources into trying to help out and work on the humanitarian recovery effort inside the area of Kyiv. Not only that, Ukrainian government buildings are going to be swamped with floodwater, meaning that during that time, no matter how long that lasts, the Russian government will probably have a massive advantage over the Ukrainian central government on being able to communicate and coordinate with their frontline forces on the battlefield, as many major buildings inside of Kyiv may be completely swamped or waterlogged, and a lot of the government bureaucrats and officials that keep the government running and keep the war effort going on a day-to-day basis would be in the process of trying to relocate, or in the process of just simply surviving at that point. So in my opinion, I would have to say that the Russians are probably planning on doing something about this dam in the future, and it most likely will be a false flag attack by the Russians, which they try and pin on Ukraine. Although I'll be entirely honest, that will be really hard for them to pull off, because the Ukrainians are in complete control of the dam, and really the only way that the Russians could destroy this dam is either by putting saboteurs around it and mining the dam and then blowing it up, which would be really tough to do considering it's probably under heavy monitoring and patrol by Ukrainian forces, or they could slam several missiles into it and hope that that destabilizes the dam structure to where it'll have a collapse and the floodwaters will flow down the river. Those two ways are going to be pretty hard to conduct without it being very clear that it's the actual Russians that are conducting that attack. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least as far as we can go with the whole Sea of Kyiv draining operation that the Russians may be planning here in the near future. But nevertheless, we have also been able to get some other breaking news today, but from some other areas of the world. Inside of Moscow, we were able to hear that the Russians actually ended up calling the United States today to quote-unquote de-escalate. This is the first time that the Russians have actually called the United States instead of the United States calling Russia. And that's a very important thing that I have to point out here to remind everyone the kind of dynamic that's going on right now. To read y'all directly at what we have from OSINT Defender, this is what we have. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin held a phone call today with the Russian Minister of Defense Andrei Belousov, replacing Sergei Shoigu, in the second discussion between the two officials in less than 3 weeks about the lowering of escalations, with the call today said to have been requested by the Russian side. Meaning that the United States didn't call up the Russians in an attempt to de-escalate. The Russians are calling America in an attempt to de-escalate. We do not know the exact details of the phone call, of course, that we have no idea or any information about at all, but it seems as though both sides are beginning to talk about possible de-escalations in the long term. And that comes with another shocking revelation that was made today. And this is one that I would have to say might be in line with what happened on this phone call. But let me read this to y'all. I didn't put this down on our map, but this is something that we do have on Twitter. So if you want to see more about this, make sure to click on the link in the description below. It takes you right to our Twitter, and you can see everything that we posted today over the past 24 hours. According to the information that we have, the Office of the President of the United States has rejected President Zelenskyy's request for authorization to strike strategic targets inside of Russia. Zelenskyy and Yermak, his chief of staff, were extremely disappointed after the conversation. And to try and read y'all a little bit that we got, a little excerpt. Why in the hell can I not say that word?
An excerpt?
An excerpt. Yeah, there we go. An excerpt of what we have today about this. Let me just read this as follows. Of course, we'll be making sure to censor any kind of political rhetoric, if there is any, inside the statement. Ukrainian leaders walked away frustrated after the President of the United States waved out their latest request to lift restrictions on the use of U.S. weapons to strike inside of Russia. People familiar with the conversation told our own Alex Ward and Enforcer Matt. I'm just kidding, it's some other Matt from some.
Whoa, they didn't tell me nothing.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy brought up the issue toward the end of the bilateral discussion on Thursday as the NATO summit came to a close, leading the President of the U.S. to say both sides should keep talking, according to three people familiar. That didn't close the door to eventually lifting the restrictions, but it was still far from a yes, the people said. Zelenskyy and Andriy Yermak, his chief of staff, were extremely disappointed after the conversation, a person familiar with the matter said. The feeling is always the same. They will lift the restrictions eventually, but some people have to die first. It seems like destroying a children's hospital is not enough, said the person who, like others, was granted anonymity to discuss the private meeting. And so it does appear.
I gotta tell you, that sounds so weak. Like, honestly, I know Zelenskyy went into that NATO conference. He was hoping to convince the U.S. officials to let him have permission to strike these bases in Russia. And obviously, right after the children's hospital incident, that was probably the perfect opportunity to go ahead and say, give Zelenskyy that permission to do so, because that would directly respond to Russia attacking the children by allowing Ukraine to go take out those strategic bombers that are literally sitting on the ground right there inside of Russia. But no, the answer is noted, though. So it's quite interesting to see that request still being rejected even to this day.
It is really wild to see, and I would have to say that it's something that a lot of people have been talking about. A lot of people have been weighing in their opinions on the American decision here to continue to deny the Ukraine permission to use long-range American weapons inside of the Russian Federation's territory. And to speak on this a little bit, I have been paying attention a little bit more keenly over the past few days, as many of y'all probably have, to the specific statements of the office of the president when it comes to Ukraine and their dealings with the Russian Federation and America's involvement in its support for Ukraine and ongoing hostilities and our support of Ukrainian defensive actions inside this war. From what I've understood, this is the current position of the office of the president. And I want to make sure to say this very clearly. This is why I'm not saying the name of the president, is that this isn't trying to get into a political battle here. This is just trying to talk about what I've been hearing and what that means really for Ukraine, and also for one of the few times I'm going to weigh in a little bit of an opinion, considering that it's something that is quite obvious to me. It seems to be the opposite. Now, as far as it's gone lately, from what I understand and what I've been able to hear, it sounds as though the office of the president is saying that the world is in fear of the United States because the United States is presenting an extremely strong front and isn't backing down in the face of adversaries like Russia and China. And then when when Ukraine requests that the United States gives them permission to use ATACMS missiles, which can fire about 250 to 300 miles inside of the Russian Federation, we then hear the office of the president say, "Wait, that's way too escalatory. That's insane. We wouldn't allow them to ever hit Moscow. That's just nuts." The problem with that, however, if I can get the measuring stick to work here on this map correctly, if we were to measure out that distance, 250 miles, which is about the approximate range of an ATACMS missile, if fired all the way from the border, it might just be able to reach near to Moscow, but it wouldn't reach Moscow. And also the other thing is that this is clearly a misrepresentation of the request that Ukraine has been making. Ukraine is not making the request, as the office of the president has been making it out to be for quite some time now, to use U.S. weapons to try and kill Putin and blow up the Kremlin. That is not at all what the Ukrainians are requesting. The Ukrainian armed forces and the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, have been requesting that American long-range weapons be permitted to be used inside of Russian Federation territory to hit within the areas of the Bryansk, Oryol, Kaluga, Tula, Lipetsk, Voronezh, Belgorod, and Rostov-on-Don Oblast to be able to target and destroy Russian airfields that are where Russian frontline bombers are fielded that are continuing to conduct these strikes against Ukrainian forces inside of Ukraine, and also against Ukrainian infrastructure as well. So far from what I've heard, and I have to really just say this outright, I would say this regardless of who the president was at this point, to try and misrepresent the claim that Ukraine wants to use these missiles to strike Moscow is completely disingenuous and is spreading a incorrect assumption on why Ukraine would want to have permission to use these long-range weapons inside of Russia. On top of that, one could, of course, do the following. If one had any common sense, you could just say Ukraine is allowed to use these weapons wherever they wish inside of Russia, but the area around Moscow and this many miles away from Moscow are completely off limits, and we will not permit Ukrainian strikes to occur within this area, and if they do, we are not going to be supporting them with any material support from that point forward, and they will make sure to oblige their request. We have seen that the Ukrainians have very good credit. They are a very upstanding country as far as our agreements that we've made with them in the past on saying, we will give you these weapons. They have had ATACMS for well over a year at this point, and we have told them for most of that time, you cannot attack at all inside of Russia, period. And they have never used ATACMS inside of Russia ever. As far as that goes, they have incredibly good standing and credit for the United States to be able to assume that we could lay out reasonable parameters and reasonable restrictions about our weapons being used inside of Russia, and that those would be followed to the letter by Ukraine because they do not want to lose further American backing and support. So going off of that, it just doesn't make any sense to completely deny them the ability to use American weapons to strike Russian air bases and Russian aircraft sitting on the tarmac that are continuing to hammer at Ukrainian infrastructure, Ukrainian citizenry, and the Ukrainian armed forces on the battlefield.
Another point as well is Ukraine has the weaponry right now in their possession. If they wanted to hit Moscow, they could. And simply the U.S. saying, don't do that, you're not allowed to, that doesn't mean anything in reality. Because if Ukraine wanted to go and start World War III and have nukes flying around everywhere, they could simply go and send missiles to the Kremlin, hit it, and that would probably trigger a bad series of events if that were to occur. And the United States simply saying, hey, look, you don't have permission, that means nothing in reality. So, you know, in actuality, the not allowing Ukraine to hit those bases that the Russian bombers are at has nothing to do with hitting Moscow. It has nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's totally separate things. And the correlation between the two is just inappropriate. It's just a stalling tactic, honestly. But before I go into politics, I'm going to stop right there. But Enforcer, what were you saying?
And also, I would like to add really quickly, this is something that I would have to say I'm not really a big fan of. And I'll be able to make this a very fair claim here. So just hold on to your horses. And I'll try and make sure to get around to all of it, but just hear me out before y'all start making comments on this. The office of the president is currently saying that the United States is positioning itself to be the strongest country in the world, and people respect us around the world. Adversaries do, like Russia and China, because they fear us. But from what I've been seeing in Eastern Europe alone, and also our approach currently in East Asia, I would say that that's the complete alternative. I will also say, before I even get into the talking about that in detail, the other side, as many of you all know, there's currently an election going on. I believe they're doing the same thing, but in a different form. It's just two different approaches to getting the same result, and I'll explain why. And I'll explain why I'm not really a big fan of this kind of U.S. posturing in the current day. Right now, the United States, at least publicly, or the office of the president, likes to say that America is a very strong country, but all of our actions so far in Eastern Europe show that we are a country that is incredibly scared of escalation, to the point that we'll almost go to reaches of appeasement to try and make sure that we do not end up escalating beyond a point that we are comfortable with. Even if it's a point of principle, we will back off of the principle to try and avoid escalation. For example, like we were talking about just 2 days ago, the Russian missiles flying over Polish airspace and the Polish government wanting to shoot down these missiles. We immediately went to the Polish and admonished them for even making that claim and saying that it's impossible for them to protect their airspace because otherwise they might end up escalating the situation in Eastern Europe. That seems to me to be a little bit weak, in my honest opinion, because the fact that Russian missiles are flying over sovereign airspace of the Republic of Poland seems to me to be a provocation and an escalation of its own. And if the Polish would like to react in their own way by shooting down these missiles and ensuring the sovereignty of their airspace and the sovereignty of the Republic of Poland, the United States should be completely behind that and supportive of that, as NATO is, a matter of fact, a defensive alliance, and the fact that armed and dangerous Russian missiles are flying through Polish airspace at all is a serious breach of the peace and a serious threat to the defense of the Republic of Poland and the rest of the NATO alliance. Not to even go on into what's going on in East Asia, which is a whole other matter, and it does seem as though, in my opinion, current U.S. actions, not only in Eastern Europe but in East Asia, are also continuing to fuel and funnel an ongoing crisis in this area as well, with Taiwan, that appears to be kicking off way earlier than many people would have even expected. at least on a diplomatic level, and it looks like the diplomatic maneuvers are now moving into warlike maneuvers, which may culminate in an actual conflict occurring around Taiwan, possibly within the next few years. But that's a very big rabbit hole to go into with how all that's working, so we'll save that for a later time. And then at the exact same time, in the Middle East, we hear that the United States is an incredibly strong country in the Middle East, and we're really backing up the Israelis in their conflict, the proxy war that's been going on against Iran. But the problem with that is that we're not, because we have not been able to show a strong enough message to the Iranians to make sure that they tell their proxies that are funded and operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. They have not told them to back off. The Houthis are still rocketing ships off of the coast of the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea. Right now, Israel's about to have to invade southern Lebanon because Hezbollah continues to conduct hostile action against the Israelis. And that is entirely because the United States has not been extremely strong and firm in putting their foot down and stopping the Iranians and stopping their proxy forces from conducting any further hostile actions against American interests in the area. All of these areas seem to be going in a downward trend at the moment because the United States is saying we're strong, but most of our actions are showing that we're incredibly scared of confrontation or possible escalation, even if it is for a good reason, and even if it is in support of furthering American interests around the globe in many different regions. I would also have
And
to say,
what's disturbing about that as well is once you start losing your ability to basically intimidate your enemies and make sure that they are properly deterred, it's really hard to get that back, because then they know, okay, they do have a red line, they're going to stop right here, and that's exactly how far we can go. We can go this far, we can kill this many civilians, we can do X, Y, and Z, and the West will do nothing about it. And the whole point of getting people deterred is to make sure that they don't try to cross those red lines that you set in the sand. And right now, every single one of them has been crossed. So now you're in a position where you have to actually go fight. You can't deter them. So now if you want to stop them, you have to actually go fight them, like directly, which is something we tried to avoid at all costs. But now we're kind of in a position where you really have to do that if you want to stop these Axis powers from gaining any more territorial power, which is not a good position to be put in. And it's kind of where we're at right now.
And then also really quickly to talk on the alternative from what I'm hearing, because many of y'all have just heard me give a pretty scathing review of current actions conducted by the United States by the current office of the president. But there is an alternative where we end up with pretty much the same result, in my opinion. It's just that we try and make it look like we were strong in the process. Like, for example, with Ukraine, there is a idea that an alternative administration may bring forward some sort of a brokered settlement in Ukraine that ends up giving away territory, and of course the valuable port of Sevastopol, possibly to the Russian Federation. And regardless whether you say that's a position of strength or not, that seems to me to be the exact same position of weakness that the current administration is putting out by not allowing Ukraine its full abilities necessary to be able to strike at the Russians and bring themselves a victory. Instead, the other side wants to bring forward this supposed idea of strength by literally just giving away stuff, when we could have, of course, continued the war on and ended up succeeding and getting Western interests secured on every single level. Then that's just on the one example. That's not talking about the Middle East, China, and other areas, but that's on that one level. And I've got to be entirely honest, the United States has to stop just on an across the board, non-political level, just speaking about it as a whole. The United States has to stop these actions of trying to pretend like we're strong. Well, not really pretending. We like to say we're strong, but every single action we take is from a position of weakness or from a disadvantageous position on a negotiating level, without even attempting to move forward and possibly escalate the situation to see if the other side will flinch or blink, and then we can go to the negotiations with an upper hand advantage. We're not seeing that. And that is something that I find to be somewhat concerning about how U.S. foreign policy is currently evolving at the moment, and that's why we see that some other countries, like France, for example, are taking the mantle largely of leadership of the Western sphere into their own hands and are having to spearhead things, because regardless of whatever direction the United States is going in at the moment, our actions are showing that we're incredibly scared of possible confrontation, even diplomatic confrontation, we are incredibly scared of at this moment. And it doesn't make any sense at all that the United States would be, because we are in an incredibly advantageous position in the world. Currently, we are the undefeated superpower. We have the largest GDP. We have the largest armed forces. Those two things alone can be leveraged against anyone currently to be able to get what the United States and the Western world needs. Yet we are so scared of leveraging that at all, we would rather give up any positions that we have in the hopes of not escalating something. If I was the president...
And also, you're right as well about France trying to step up and sort of take over the mantle of NATO leadership. That's because, like, naturally, every single time there's a selection of a leader, the strongest person typically is going to be the one who's selected. So France has taken a very strong position, kind of shockingly, because at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, France was kind of on the fence. They were like sort of all over the place, and now they've really gone pro-Ukraine. They've done a lot of things, including threatening to send troops into Ukraine to stop the war as well. They've gone above and beyond at trying to deter Putin, which is kind of contrary to what we've seen from the United States in sort of contrast there. So that's why France is able to get some sort of hold over NATO itself to really take the mantle, is because they actually have strength behind their actions, and they're not just talking.
And really quickly, that is a very good point. Really quickly, just to make sure that we level this out, and I say what I think should be done. If I was to be the president of the United States, let's just say, because right now the United States is posed with two options, the current or the, well, really the former or the latter. That's the options that we currently have. What if I step forward, and instead of telling y'all that your only options are the former and the latter, what if I tell you that there's a third option, and this is my option, the enforcer option, and start spreading this around, because this is what I think that the United States should start doing. Let's address the entire world stage in one go. In Eastern Europe, this is the most important battlefront that the United States and the Western world is facing at the moment, because this is the one that actually shows what American resolve and Western resolve is when faced with actual conflict. The United States needs to immediately grant permission to the state of Ukraine to be able to use Ukrainian long-range munitions on any Russian targets within the Russian Federation that are within range, except for the area of the city of Moscow and a 15-mile perimeter surrounding the outskirt of the city of Moscow, starting at the Z120, well, actually the A108, right out here. 10 miles from outside of that, and inside of that perimeter, everything is untouchable. Everything else within range is fair game for Ukraine to be able to hit and destroy. Another thing that I believe that the United States should...
About, I would say, 15 seconds of it.
All right, so let me see if I can try and recap everything in my head and get back to it. So, we need to, of course, grant Ukraine permission to use the ATACMS. So I'm hoping that you all heard that, and about the perimeter, the exclusion perimeter around Moscow. But everything else would be on the table, and everything else could be a target for Ukraine, well, for U.S.-made missiles. The other thing that I believe that the United States should do is that we should begin to bolster the presence of our armed forces in the Baltics and Poland. This is clearly an escalatory action, I will admit that, but it is an escalatory action with an aim. The escalatory action in building up our forces in the area of the Baltics and Poland, and especially air defense assets, and also Air Force assets as well, such as fighter brigades moved into the area of Poland, and specifically Sweden and Finland, would be to make sure to put pressure on the Russians that a conventional war would not be able to begin from the outset, as their initial shock and awe air campaign in the form of missiles and drones would fail immediately, outright, due to the Air Force and air defense assets in the area, meaning that a conventional war and the possibility of one would be permanently frozen in a realistic perspective. That would also be, of course, escalatory. The Russians would start to freak out, and we could begin to see... Are we back?
I think we're back now. Unfortunately, I think that's on your end, because my end's perfectly fine over here.
It is certainly on my end. It's a little weird, though, Matthew, don't you think? Because as soon as I start talking about what I think should be done, then we start getting floored, like, the entire time.
Maybe so. Are you sure the Wi-Fi card's set properly and everything?
Oh, yeah, it's set properly. I just had to reset it right there. But how much did everyone hear, Matthew? What was the last thing that was heard before the lag hit?
I think you were right in the middle of what you were saying. I can't remember what, though. I was too busy typing.
Oh, okay. Well, I was in the middle of something, so let me try and restart and try and figure out, hopefully, what y'all heard and what y'all didn't hear. So, as far as what I would believe, and let me try and get my thoughts back together after figuring out that I was probably cut off for about a good 30 seconds of that. Let's see here, the Baltic states. So we would be in a fairly good negotiating position at that point with the buildup of forces. The Russians, of course, would escalate, but we are in a far more advantageous position and have a lot more to leverage against the Russians, meaning that because of this buildup of forces in Europe and the rising tensions, the Russians would probably won off as things would start to get very overwhelming, and of course they would be, if an actual conventional war was to break out, in an incredibly disadvantageous position off of the bat. This would start to show the Russians that the war in Ukraine is not just unwinnable inside of Ukraine, but a larger conventional war in Europe is not even something that can be threatened with a straight face. And this will start to lead them to believe that it would be better to get to the negotiating table and possibly start ceding a lot of their Ukrainian holdings, including Crimea, the most important of them all, which would start to put the West in a very serious position, showing that they are more than willing to back our interests even with the force of arms if necessary. For example, the buildup in Eastern Europe. This will start to spread a message around the rest of the world. Of course, many people would be saying that sounds like saber rattling, that sounds like warmongering to do something like that. I would say that it's better to do saber rattling than it is to back off and be a coward in every single situation around the world and then pretend like America's strong. If you have the biggest gun in the room, but you are the biggest coward and every single time someone walks in, you go and throw the gun out of a window, that big gun means nothing. We have to be able to leverage our power as well as our ability to dictate the course of events in the world like we should be. That will send a message to the Middle East, for example, Iran. It will show the United States, if continued hostilities continue against Israel by Iran, will react to the Iranians in an incredibly major form. The deaths and injuries of any further U.S. service members in the Middle East will be met by a major, by an air campaign against Iran, attempting to destroy their naval assets and possibly any nuclear research development projects that they have ongoing inside of Iran currently. That would also send a message to the Chinese as well that they possibly need to wait on dealing with Taiwan. One of the biggest things that stops China from invading Taiwan and attempting to reunify them is that there is the possibility, a high likelihood, of U.S. military intervention. But as things are going right now in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, there is no chance of military intervention. We would probably tell the Taiwanese that they're on their own because we don't want to attempt to escalate a conflict with the Chinese. So we need to make sure that we have a strong front. There are many countries currently that want to take advantage of the United States, and they are starting to smell blood in the water with how we're beginning to act on a diplomatic level at this point, and there needs to be a massive change from leaders in the United States pretending like we're strongmen and every single action that they take is actually from a position of cowardice and trying to avoid confrontation outright to the level of appeasement. We need to move forward to where we do not want war, but if we have to go to war to achieve our interest, then we will. And you either have to get a little bit of what you want or you'll get nothing what you want, and the United States will go to war with you. One or the other. Take your poison. That's the way we should be working things. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And that is one of the few times on this channel that I've ever really gone into how I believe that U.S. foreign policy should be conducted at the moment. And a lot of people, and I'm sure, and this is a fair critique, many people are going to be saying that sounds incredibly aggressive. And it is very aggressive. We are dealing with a wildly aggressive world at this point. If this was more of a calm and collected world, of course, our reactions would be a lot less severe and they would be a lot less confrontational and escalatory. But right now, we are dealing with nations that are more than happy to conduct any kind of escalations that they see fit on their end against us. And right now, we are doing nothing but backing off. And we are showing them the further and further they go, there is no resistance because we don't really have a red line anymore. We don't have a line drawn in the sand. They can really take what they want. We cannot have that. That is a very weak look. That is how we will end up losing the Western sphere. That is why France will eventually create a European sphere, splitting the Western sphere into two, and then we will see the rise of a multipolar world, which will be massively beneficial for the Chinese, which are attempting to grow their own major sphere and are hoping to draw in these minor spheres that may be created in the future into their fold. We cannot have that happen. That is something that just cannot be assured. So if you want something like that, start spreading that idea around. It's not party A or party B's idea, it's my idea. So make sure to spread that around. Hopefully that'll pick up. because I'm honestly I'm very, very tired of people saying the same rhetoric in the United States that we are a strong country and we're presenting a strong image around the world and countries respect us when every single action taken by the current office of the president and the former office of the president, in my opinion, was nothing more than appeasement or fear, and then appeasement because of the fear of a possible confrontation. I'm not a big fan of that.
You know, here's my hot take on it. Like I was kind of alluding to earlier, I think sadly to get out of the rut that we've kind of found ourselves in here, I think we're ultimately going to be dragged into probably some type of global conflict. I'm not saying here in the next couple of months or like maybe a year or something like that, but even the military leadership says that the likelihood of a major global conflict with a lot of countries involved all around the world, like World War III type scenario, is probably pretty likely in the next 10 years. And I think we're sort of like getting right on the verge of that. We're not quite there yet, but you know, if no corrective actions are taken, we're certainly going that way. And right now, it doesn't look like there really is anything happening to really take us away from that. So right now, we're seeing gunfire and we're running away from it. And really, what we should be doing is running toward the gunfire, but we're doing the opposite. So I think we found ourselves sort of in a spot where we're going to fight our way out of it instead of just walking our way out of it.
I would have to agree, and that's something that a lot of people have to face. The world is not an easy place. It's actually the normal state of the world is a constant state of war. The peace that the United States has enjoyed has made us believe that this kind of a long-lasting peace, what some people call the Pax Americana, a lot like the Pax Romana, which was the Roman peace that lasted for about 400 straight years, is something that's supposed to last forever, and it's precious and it's sacred, and we must ensure that the Pax Americana continues. We cannot have it continue if we allow our enemies and our adversaries around the world to constantly chip away at the very world that the Pax Americana exists in. And that is something that cannot happen. It is something that we see happening, and well, I've seen happening at least over the past 12 years, in my opinion. And we see that everyone just keeps coming forward, and they want to say, oh, we're strong. But then we do actions that don't really show strength, in my opinion. It's always waffling, well, that would be in America's interest, but, maybe the Russians do have a point. It's not about if the Russians have a point. It's about what do we want and what do we need. And what we need is for Ukraine to be in NATO. Not only is it a major strategic concern, it is also an economic opportunity, not just for America, but for all of our allies in the West. And that is something that we want. It does not matter if the Russians would want Ukraine. That's not their problem. That's our problem. And if they want Ukraine, they can try and find a way to persuade Ukraine over to their side, or they can deal with us. And I'm sure they don't want to deal with us, one or the other. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And in the meantime, we have been able to hear something about the F-16s that are on the way. We've been able to hear that NATO reiterates maintenance and runway concerns today inside of Ukraine, saying that maintenance of the F-16s might be really challenging, and also there's not a lot of suitable runways inside of Ukraine. And also, they have said that a whopping, an amazing, incredible 6 F-16s are going to be making it into Ukraine this summer. And by the end of the year, they might have 20 out of the 82 or so that they've been promised so far. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts on this. And so a lot of people are actually saying that NATO is sending in the 6 jets as a test. Although there's still multiple on the way that have already been promised, and they are going to be on their way to Ukraine eventually. Some others are saying that Ukraine is doing their best. It works. And others are saying it sounds like bogus to me, and others are a little bit unsure and undecided. I have to say I have some very choice opinions on this. I don't mean to have nothing but scathing reviews today, as far as I can say. But Matthew, what are you thinking about this? What is everyone else thinking about this? And I'll throw in my opinions here in a second on that.
All right, so it looks like 52% of the audience on this one said that NATO is sending only 6 jets as a quote-unquote test, while 22% said Ukraine is doing their best on the maintenance and runway concerns, and whatever they have, it works. And 14% said, it all sounds like bogus to me. And on this one, I'm actually with the 52%. When I found out today that we were only sending 6 F-16s to Ukraine, like the enforcer said, we promised a lot more than that. That is a relatively small number of those jets. And that is intentional. We're only sending 6 for a reason, and I think that reason is we're sending those as a test. Because like I mentioned the other night, there are still some concerns about the runways in Ukraine. They're not exactly perfect, but at the same time, I'm not sure if that's a total bar to Ukraine getting F-16s and being able to use them effectively. So I think it's a test. It's probably not the wisest thing to do because if we're going to give F-16s, we should go all in on it and not go in sort of like lukewarm like this seems to be. But kind of like the Enforcer said, I feel like I'm giving scathing remarks tonight as well. I don't tend to sound like that, but the news coming out is a little bit iffy that I'm seeing today. So hopefully it improves, but it sounded a little iffy. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm not a big fan of this. I think it sounds like bogus. That would be my honest truth. Because 6 F-16s, we have been waiting for these F-16s for about a year and 3 months now. It's been almost half the length of the war. We've been waiting for these F-16s to arrive, and we've been hearing that the Ukrainian pilots are going through training. Lots of them are going through training. Dozens of them are going through training and training and training and training. And then we were told, oh, the F-16s, they're going to be there by late last year, around the fall or the winter. And then they said, oh, sorry, everyone, actually, the Ukrainians aren't doing that good in training. All these dozens of pilots that are going to be taking these dozens of F-16s to Ukraine, we're going to have to push that on into the spring of this year, in 2024. And then the spring of this year came around, and they said, oh, actually, it's going to be the midsummer. And then now they're saying it's not going to be the midsummer, it's going to be about in a few weeks when the first F-16s start to fly inside of Ukraine. And now we are hearing that it's not even the dozens of them that we've been hearing about for a while in this Ukrainian training class, the first one that went over into Europe. Now we're hearing it's only going to be 6 of them, and maybe by the end of this year, they'll have about 20 of them flying. That is absurd. There are 82 F-16s that have currently been promised to Ukraine. Those aren't aircraft that are still up in the air. They're not saying we're going to send 6 of them and then figure out we're going to send you the remaining 70 or so of them. They said we have 82 of these promised and they're all going to be going to Ukraine. So it seems absolutely insane to me to go, oh, we're just going to send 6 of them and then try and make it sound like we're trying to have a trial run. We have already promised them 82. If we weren't dead set, if all these European countries that have been promising these F-16s weren't dead set on sending them, why promise them? Why not make it a conditional thing? Say, we'll send a few of them to see how they do, and then we'll send more. They didn't say that. They said we're going to send them 82, and now we're hearing there's only going to be maybe 20 by the end of this year. And this is a very pivotal point in this war. Like I've been saying, the Russians are showing signs economically and militarily that they are in a very rough spot. It may end up collapsing by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. It would make no sense out of the 80 or so of them that we have promised Ukraine that only about a quarter of them make it into Ukraine by that point. That is insanely low. Most of them at that point, if the war really did end by the beginning of next year, most of those F-16s would actually be arriving after the war is over. And then they're completely useless. They're completely pointless. Not only that, they are going to be a massive drag on the Ukrainian government financially after the war because they're going to be supporting this massively bloated Air Force, and they didn't even really get to use it at all during the actual war. It's something that is just aggravated me a great deal hearing that today because it's a disappointment. And it's not really, and some people are going to be saying it's a disappointment on America. It's not necessarily a disappointment on America because none of these F-16s are actually being provided directly from the United States. They're being provided by other countries like the Netherlands and Denmark. But I don't understand. I just don't even get where anyone's coming from with this, regardless who they are in Europe that are providing these F-16s and the United States that are allowing them to send these F-16s to Ukraine. Where in the world this incredibly slow, wildly slow timeline is coming from. And another thing is why in the world are they reiterating the logistical concerns? Are they saying out of the year and 4 months that we've had these guys in training that they have not at all considered training a substantial amount of ground crews to be able to operate these aircraft when they get in Ukraine? What is the plan? I mean, what was the plan from the start? We were just going to train the pilots and then send the aircraft in without any maintenance or infrastructure? That's stupid. I mean, that sounds absolutely stupid if you think about it. That's like saying we trained the bus driver and we got the school bus, but we don't have anywhere to park the school bus. The bus driver's just got to be driving around all day and pray to God that if they run out of gas, they're not trying to run a route at that point. That makes no sense at all. I don't mean to sound like I'm just giving scathing statements tonight. But I'll be quite honest with you, all the news I've gotten today is incredibly aggravating to me. I don't know if y'all share in that aggravation with me, but I feel like NATO needs to pick up the damn ball a little bit and get up to speed. This is a war. This isn't something where we're just trying to conduct a little humanitarian mission, dropping off some bottles of water and some MREs. We are trying to support Ukraine in a full-on active war, and we have to make sure that they are able to support this Air Force of F-16s we're giving them. And we have to make sure that they are able to fulfill the logistical requirements of these aircraft. And somehow, over a year and 4 months that we've been training the pilots and constantly pushing that back, no one has even thought about training a substantial amount of ground crews to maintain and operate these aircraft. At least that's what I'm hearing today.
Also, I saw Nicholas Condor saying in the live chat, it says it actually takes longer to train the maintenance crews than it takes to train the pilots. Now, I will say I'm not an expert on that, so I couldn't confirm that if I wanted to. But Enforcer, is that true? Do the maintenance crews take longer to train?
Maintenance crews sometimes do take longer to train. I believe it's actually the chiefs of the crews that take a while to train. But the actual, if you want to call them the grunts of the repair teams, you know, your normal mechanics, usually the engineer leader or the flight or the ground crew leader can kind of just lead the rest of the ground crew through a lot of the maintenance procedure and get things done. So it's really just the ground crew leaders that have to take a lot of training. The other ground crew, it is substantial training, but it's not as much as the actual ground crew leaders. But nevertheless, even still, no one factor that into the timetables or anything. I mean, this is just integral to anything. Like if the United States raised the brand new, like, let's just take this for an example. I'm trying to find out the best way to explain this. We are introducing brand new F-35s into the U.S. Air Force currently, and we're replacing older aircraft like F-16s and A-10 Warthogs with these brand new F-35s. That requires the pilots to be trained, and that requires ground crews and ground crew leaders to also be trained to be able to maintain and operate those aircraft, all from the ground up. It all has to be done just like we're doing with Ukraine right now. And when the United States Air Force does it, we can account for the amount of ground crew members that will be needed, how many will be needed per an air wing, how many of them will be needed per air brigade, and then we're also able to account for how long the pilot training is going to take, and then figure out when we're going to be able to integrate those F-35s into the Air Force in that specific wing and then in that brigade. And we're able to do that incredibly well here in America. But then when we want to do that with Ukraine, instead of just saying, let's take the American U.S. Air Force template and just pop that onto Ukraine for the training times and the turnaround times, we go, okay, everyone, every man for themselves, just train the pilots, we'll figure out everything else sometime in the future. And that makes no sense at all. Like, I don't know if it sounds like gibberish, Matthew, but to me, that kind of thinking, it's just making no sense to me. It's showing a complete lack of initiative in the background on getting these F-16s actually into Ukraine and getting them used.
I don't think it's a lack of initiative, really, because I think there are ground crews in Ukraine. There's not a whole bunch there, but I think there already are some there. I think it's more of a lack of willingness, really, not really initiative. And it's kind of intentional. And I don't want to get political, so I'm going to stop there. But there seems to be a lack of will to really go all in and support Ukraine all the way, which sort of feeds into the idea that the U.S. is kind of using Ukraine as a way to wear down the Russians, and that maybe the U.S. isn't totally concerned with Ukraine, decisively winning the war. And I think that's something the U.S. is really going to have to work on fixing in the future, because if this keeps up the way this is going, it looks like we're using Ukraine, which is not a good look. And we should make sure that while we're using Ukraine to wear down the Russians, we acknowledge that. They should also give Ukrainians the tools they need to actually win the war decisively, because without that, it's really one-sided.
I'll tell you what, here, because I'm seeing a lot of people actually saying this. And right now, the truth is that from what we're hearing with the F-16s, the ground crew maintenance side of things is up shit creek without a paddle at the moment, and the pilots are really the only ones who are ready. So, how about this? We now have to work with that situation. We can't go back in time. So what if we do this instead? What if we create a coalition of advisors and liaisons from multiple different countries in NATO? The entire group of liaisons and advisors are literally just ground crews for F-16s from the Netherlands, from Denmark, from the United States, from Poland, and we just send them in. How about that? We can make sure that these F-16s will be maintained and operated, considering that apparently we've completely dropped the ball on either accounting for how long the ground crews are going to be required to be trained, or we just didn't train them. How about that? I feel like that's a fairly good workaround, because at this point, they got to get there. And considering that we've dropped the ball and we've bungled this entire thing at this point with the ground crews, let's just figure out how in the world NATO can actually step in and maintain the aircraft so Ukraine can fly them, and we'll make sure that they keep flying. I feel like that would be a fairly good workaround at this point. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we actually do have a couple of questions from y'all tonight, and y'all been throwing in some really interesting questions. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our first super chat of the night is going to go to Bilo, who's also been thrown in his second super chat, I believe that is, and huge shout out to Bilo for that very generous $50 donation. We appreciate that very much, and of course, it helps to keep the channel running. And he said, "Your pimp marmot is now my profile pic on What's Up. And if you want, you can grab a question from the live chat."
And thank you so much for the support, Bilo. And I love to know that you like the pimp marmot. That was a good gaff. Like, I love doing that in that question segment. I actually still have it saved in Canva. Like, the way we made it and everything right here.
Hey, there it is.
Man.
Oh my god.
That was so freaking good, man. I love that thing. And I gotta thank you, Bilo, so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible, help us to keep this rolling. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to do this and be on air, to be able to come up with funny stuff like this. And not only that, report on the news like we're getting tonight. It is amazing to know that folks like you support us, Bilo, and I gotta thank you for being a part of this Lee Spring Army and helping this channel to keep on being possible, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, folks like you, specifically Bilo, we wouldn't be able to be here right now covering this news, getting to talk about some of the aggravating things that have happened today. And I'll be honest with y'all, I'm sure y'all seen me in rare form tonight. I rarely ever get aggravated at a lot of the news that's coming out any given day, but I'll be entirely honest with y'all. I've sat back today and I've just listened to everything that came out with the F-16s, with the United States denying Ukraine to use long-range American weapons, and then on top of that, what we said to Poland a couple of days ago. And to be quite honest, it has aggravated the hell out of me, the kind of stance that's being made in Eastern Europe at the moment. So I'm kind of letting that flow over on stream, but I hope that y'all are getting a good bit out of it. I mean, whether y'all are agreeing or disagreeing, I hope it's interesting nevertheless. And I thank you so much once again for the support, Bilo, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for liking the pimp marmot. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we will make sure to grab a live chat in honor of Bilo. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and that live chat question is going to go to JL. He says, "Why hold out on Moscow?" referring to Ukraine's ability to strike Moscow, because after all, Russia has attacked Kyiv.
That is a good question. The reason why is that if Ukraine attacked Moscow, they would be attacking Moscow with American weapons. There is no problem, actually, with Ukraine directly attacking the city of Moscow. They have done that in the past with their own drones. The problem is that if they use an American weapon to do something like that, they could start to the best word I could use in the moment is incriminate the United States and make it look as though we are using Ukraine by proxy for America to strike directly at Moscow. And that can end up creating a major political, well, not a political, a diplomatic incident in between the United States and Russia. And while I am a big fan of wanting to see Ukraine conduct possibly escalatory actions, the Russians will take them as escalatory, and seeing America conduct escalatory actions within Eastern Europe to put pressure on the Russians, I'm also one who understands there is a limit to a point of escalation where it stops being escalatory for the sake of trying to get into an advantageous diplomatic position to where we start to actually cause serious escalations that are really not conducive to anything. And those kinds of escalations of allowing Ukraine to strike Moscow with ATACMS or any other kind of weapons, that would escalate for the hell of it, and it wouldn't really be escalation with a purpose on a diplomatic end. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least with the why we wouldn't want them to hit Moscow with ATACMS. I'm all for Ukraine hitting Moscow, as long as they do it with their own weapons. But if they do it with American weapons, then Russia could say that America is the one that's striking at Russia, and we're pretty much trying to conduct official acts of war against them, and then that ends up being a whole diplomatic ordeal. Even if that's not the case, that's what it'll turn into. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you for a great live chat, though, because that's really the only big difference in between Ukraine striking and not striking Moscow is if it's with our weapons or not, and if it is our weapons, how would the Russians react to that? And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support, Bilo, and helping this channel to keep it running and helping it to be possible, because it is folks like you who helped make this thing a reality. And so thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, another really good point I just saw in the live chat, by the way, speaking of the whole discussion we're having, from Melissa Phillips. She said, Russia are using Iran and North Korea weapons to attack Ukraine. And that is true. Iran and North Korea didn't place any restrictions at all on how Russia uses their weapons to strike Ukrainian territory. And Iran and North Korea are the two supporters of Russia's war in Ukraine, or at least just two of them. And meanwhile, for Ukraine, they have the entire West behind them. But right now, the West is holding them back from using some of those weapons on certain places. Now, I'm with the Enforcer. I do not agree with using weapons on the Kremlin because while it would be deserved, Russia does have nuclear weapons, and that does have to be kept in mind that they could start launching those if their main government building is attacked. And that wouldn't be too far out of the realm of possibility for that to happen. So we always got to keep that in mind. We don't want Ukraine to be flattened by a nuke. But at the same time, we can't get so scared of Putin that we're not willing to do anything. So that is a good point indeed. But Enforcer, did you want to weigh in before we moved on?
No, I think you covered that fairly well, and I think we are on to that second question.
And this one goes to Plant Lady, who puts in a very generous $50 donation as well. And huge shout out to Plant Lady, who's a longtime channel supporter, for that support. They said, I always try to listen to my favorite enforcers, but lately I'm catching the show the following day. And I loved the pimped out marmot. And I suggest adding Twinkie refreshments on a table while he entertains. And please take a question from the chat.
Man, everyone loved the pimped out marmot. Everyone did. And I got to say, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for enjoying the pimped out marmot because that was really one of the funnest live chat segments we've done recently. It was kind of like the Biggie Bag Detroit segment that we did on the Hood Review that one time. That really like emblazoned the Hood Review into live chat channel history. But I gotta say, thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you so much for loving the show because we try our best to make sure that we put out the news every single night. I kind of got into weighing in on my opinions a little bit tonight. Rarely ever do that in a large form, but I hope that it was interesting, and I saw that a lot of people in the chat were apparently agreeing a great deal, especially about U.S. positioning currently in the world and how it should change. So, you know, if you like that, make sure to vote for me for president in 2040. I can't guarantee the points. My positions would be the same. Then the world will have changed a lot in about 17 years. But nevertheless, if you want that kind of common sense reasoning and decision making, you know who to vote for. But beyond that, I got to thank you so much for enjoying the show, Plant Lady. Regardless whether I'm covering the news or throwing out my opinion, very rare time I did tonight. And also, I think we will add the Twinkie refreshments. We actually have hot dogs, but I think we're going to open up a lemonade stand too down there. Put another fly and then a lemonade stand down there. Something like that so that we can get some refreshments, you know what I mean? But still, thank you so much once again for the support. And thank you so much once again for being a longtime viewer of this channel, Plant Lady, and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because it is folks like you who helped make this thing possible. And so with that, we will make sure to take a live chat question in honor of Plant Lord. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so that live chat question in honor of Plant Lord goes to AF Kaplan, who says, does Moscow have a dam anywhere near the city? Because I'm just curious.
Moscow, I do not believe, has a dam near the city of Moscow of any reasonable size, because the Moskva River is quite small. Now, we do have this area here, which is all a part of the Moskva River, and considering that the river flows south, there is a small kind of a dam right there, and there should be others, considering that, yep, here's another one. It appears here's some kind of an industrial area. I don't even know what that is. And then we have a lock system right here to transport vessels up and down the river. So there is a dam. It's just that I don't believe that this dam would cause any sizable damage, considering that this entire area down here appears to be an industrial area where the flood waters would go. So I would generally have to say, yes, there is a dam near Moscow. It's a very small one, especially compared to the Sea of Kyiv, but it could cause a little bit of damage, possibly. But I would highly discourage against striking dams inside of any capital city. Even if the Russians do it, I don't find, committing atrocities in response to atrocities to be wildly fair, or for that matter, Western, really, because the West is supposed to rise above these kinds of atrocities. While our foes may more than happily do things like this, we are supposed to be at a higher level, best way to put it, a little bit more civilized. And so we wouldn't end up conducting atrocities in response to atrocities. We would just end up at the end of the war holding the people responsible who conducted the atrocities, and then, of course, instituting some form of justice, usually the implementation of a death penalty. But with that, well, actually, many countries in the world have abolished the death penalty, including Russia officially. The United States is one of the few that actually still has the death penalty. But that's why I say that justice at the end of the war should be dispensed by America. Because crimes against humanity, especially on a severe and industrial scale, like the explosion of the Sea of Kyiv dam north of Kyiv, I believe that should be punishable with the death sentence in any kind of a war crime or a crime against humanity tribunal. But with that,
they say that Russia took the death penalty off the books. Man, who are they trying to fool with that?
I know,
It's like the guys walk out the windows. They get windowed daily. It's like there may not be a death penalty on the books, but it's like now you don't have to go through any due process for the death penalty. So all they did was actually they made it worse, because now if Putin wants to get you, you're not going to go to court and then get put to death. You're just going to simply find your way to the ground. That's all.
yeah, it's like that's so stupid. That's like. That's like Russia saying, "Oh, actually, we're above and beyond. That America is the one who has the death penalty. Very, very cruel people." It's like y'all just kill people without even the due process or law.
Yeah.
Like it's like at least in America you get in front of a jury and you actually have a proper trial. Over there in Russia, you get put in a little cage and then they go life in prison, and then they just have someone come and blow your brains out in prison. It's like you didn't even have due process with that. It's just that they didn't like you enough that they killed you. But anyways. With that.
Not that Russian due process means anything, really, because if they went to court, it's not like they're going to get a fair trial or something. It's like it's all rigged. It's not going to be really meaningful. So, at least they could have had the image of getting a fair trial, and maybe they won't get put to death. But 99.99% sure they're getting put to death if Putin wants them to go.
Man, it kind of to be honest, it's a lot like the Japanese judicial system. Really, like with the Russians, it's more for show, and a lot of people don't know this actually about Japan. Just to throw this in, they are an ally of ours. Huge respect to them, by the way, and huge respect to any Japanese viewers watching. But their judicial system is really weird because it largely operates off of a premise of guilty until proven innocent. And what's wild about that is that the Japanese government can arrest you and hold you indefinitely by law until they find enough evidence to then put you on trial and convict you. The Japanese justice system has a 99%, I think it's actually a 99.2% conviction rate.
That's crazy. But I will say, though, at least Japan's crime's pretty low.
Oh, Japan's crime is really low because people are scared of breaking the law because they will get you. Like, they will get you. They will put you in jail until they find enough evidence against you to put you in prison. So, the Japanese judicial system is a little bit weird. And to be honest, it actually scares me away a little bit from ever wanting to travel to Japan in the future. Because if you're ever falsely accused of a crime and the police have enough of a reasonable suspicion to arrest you, you're pretty much going to be stuck in jail indefinitely until they find enough evidence against you to then put you in prison. So that is always something that scares me a little bit. And also, YouTube said the burden of proof is on the accused in Japan. That's what's crazy about it. I actually watched something about how Japanese defense attorneys work. They don't even really work for their client. Like, they just kind of work to be like, oh, come on, make the sentence a little less. Like, they don't even say he's innocent. Like, they're just like, oh, come on.
They're trying to screw those plea deals out there. They're not trying to actually go to trial. They're just trying to get the deal.
Well, no, because with how Japan works, they only move you to a trial if they have enough evidence to actually convict you. So the trial is really more of a show at that point because there's so much evidence they built up against you, there's really no way to even defend against it. So at that point, your defense attorney is literally just trying to get your sentence as low as it possibly can be because there's really almost no chance that you can get out of any kind of punishment at that point.
That's crazy. And I'm not trying to rabbit hole, by the way, but I'll just end it with this. The Japanese prison, you don't want to end up there either. That's pretty tough.
Yeah, they got tough prisons in Japan. But the crime rate is wildly low. Maybe for that reason, but you do have to admit that is a pretty weird judicial system. I would say it's actually kind of a little unfair and maybe unjust, but if that's the way they keep the crime low, that's a Japanese thing and that's their internal affair, but still really interesting. But with that, we are now going to be moving on back into Kyiv because we still have lots of news to cover. And so we're going to be moving on into our location unknowns. Oh, actually, I think we have one last question left. And we do, actually. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for the support, Plant Lady. I hope that did address that live chat fairly well, also with the whole Russian thing and all that, and the dam around Moscow. But still, thank you for sponsoring that live chat. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on to the remainder of the news.
And this one is going to go to GunFox61, who's a longtime channel supporter as well, and threw in a $50 donation. Also, very generous support, and thank you very much, GunFox, for that. He said, Enforcer, if Ukraine was able to get both the OH-58 and the AH-64E longbow, also, I sent Enforcer Matt a few F-16 tail art pictures, and a few look really good. Now, I agree with that. I saw them earlier. He said, I think 24 AH-64Es will do more than F-16s when paired with the OH-58, and a question from the chat.
And that is a really good point, Gunfox 61. Older Apaches just would not cut it. It would have to be Apaches that have some form of the longbow air-to-ground radar above the rotors. Those would be the only helicopters that are really usable in the modern war arena inside of Ukraine. I would say that they would be wildly usable. And also, I would say that the OH-58s, the Kiowas, would be very important. It sounds to me, Gunfox, that you're not trying to just get Ukraine helicopters. You're trying to create a small air cav unit for them, because that would have been what you're saying. I think that would have been close to a Gulf War era battle order for an air cav regiment, with the OA-50 Kiowas operating as the scouts, and then the AH-64Es engaging, isolating, and destroying the enemy forces from afar. That actually sounds a lot like that. And I would have to say, Gunfox 61, you're not wrong. Our air cav regiments in the United States are specifically designed nowadays to be able to engage and destroy the enemy with heliborne forces without them sustaining incredibly high losses. And that's the whole point of why the Kiowa right here in this picture has that giant bulbous-looking ball on top of the rotors. That is a giant camera system that operates in infrared, night vision, and a normal sight mode that allows this crew to stay below the horizon pretty much, or in cover, while they're able to use the camera on top of the helicopter to be able to look over a tree line and see what's miles beyond them, which is a very cool thing about how the United States conducts heliborne warfare. But the AH-64E, and let me go see if I can get a picture of one. And let's see here. Here is the AH-64E. You can actually see the longbow radar right up there on the top of the rotor. That helps out a lot with target acquisition and destroying enemy vehicles, ground vehicles. And so if we gave them a decent amount of Hellfires, and we gave them about 20 of these AH-64Es, unlike their Russian counterparts, which actually get shot down at exceedingly high rates, like the Ka-52, these would actually have a really high chance of survival. Probably few of them would end up getting shot down. So, of course, we would have to end up getting the Ukrainians some AH-64Es, some Kiowas, and then end up training the pilots and the ground crews. But I think that that is entirely possible, and that would really help them out in the long form in the war in Ukraine. And so I got to thank you so much for the support. I would say that's actually a really good idea if the United States wanted to do that, because it was largely fail-proof in my opinion. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we will make sure to get that live chat question in honor of Gunfox 61, and then we're getting on into the rest of the Frontline news.
All right, and this one goes to N. Hansen, who says, are we sure that someone no longer in Putin's favor was on the board? Or on board?
Was on board.
I didn't mean that plane.
No, I don't think so. From what I heard, it was all the actual operating crew, pretty much the pilots, the pilot, co-pilot, and maybe an engineer that was on board, or maybe just a extra pilot in a jump seat or something. But there was only 3 people on board. We didn't hear of anyone who was an oligarch or anyone who had gone against Putin that was on board the aircraft. So it appears to just be a failure, possibly due to crumbling Russian aviation infrastructure. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And thank you once again, Gunfox61, for sponsoring that live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is time for us to move on into our location unknowns, where we got to see, of course, another Swedish Archer in service. Really neat to see these things. I always like them. I think they're really cool, and I like the Barracuda camo coating that they get. But moving on from that and into our next bit of location unknown news, we also got to see the Ukrainian Air Force launching some AGM-88 harms with extremely copyrighted music playing in the background.
Man, I guess you could say the Ukrainians are dismissing the Russians' case with prejudice.
Man, that case dismissed.
Just like an Alec Baldwin, you know what I mean?
My goodness.
Don't pull a Baldwin in Japan. You'll be in some hot water.
I'm telling you what, man, they keep you in jail until they find the evidence. They're like, we got it, he's guilty. But man, look at these little fellas go. Aren't they nice?
Writing on it too, with a Sharpie.
Sadly, I don't know what that said, but still, really neat to see it. Really cool to know that that was the 831st Brigade of the Ukrainian Air Force. And with that, we're now moving on into our next clip, where we also got to see a MiG-29 being pulled out of a hardened shelter in preparation for a mission. We don't know what kind, but we can see it getting pulled out by a Ural 4320, specifically the ground maintenance version, and we can see the MiG-29 right back there. Pick goes hard, feel free to screenshot. But moving on from that and into our last bit of location unknown news, we also got to see the Russian casualty report. And great googly moogly!
Oh!
That thing is
Hey,
juice!
Bobcats. I tell you what, after the Chipotle gate, I'm very glad to see it went up from 4 Bobcats, which I think it was last night, to 8. They doubled it just for the Chipotle gate scandal. They brought it up. I love to see it.
Man, I'm telling you what, it is really nice to see. And so, with that, we got 1,030 Russian soldiers wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 23 APCs, 84 supply trucks, 9 main battle tanks, 48 artillery systems, 26 drones, 5 cruise missiles, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 8 Bombcat skid steers. It was an impressively good day for Ukraine, and speaking of impressively good, it was going wildly good up in the area around Vovchansk. We were able to see that the Ukrainians were targeting and attacking Russian forces in this area to incredibly large degrees. Starting off with our first clip, where we got to see that the border guards were destroying some enemy forces with the artillery. Check it out. See him driving on along here.
Бегом, посадка. Бегом, 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 бегом. Бегом. Бегом, бля.
We now see them trying to turn the truck around.
They're driving manual, too, on the battlefield. That's kind of intense.
We now see him getting out. Hey, good night, Neil. We now see the press crew moving on along, getting ready to film their artillery unit in operation. We can see them going down into a bunker of a sort.
Перший, ну що ти? Вогонь.
Oh, it's an M101! Dang! Dude, they got that World War II artillery out.
Плюс, через хвилину ще один кинеш.
That guy just has pure peace down there in the bunker.
Постріл!
Пулі. Плюс, маскуйте і в укриття.
Ну, стріляємо доволі таки активно.
That guy is sweating like I was last
Дуже, я б
night.
сказав, активно.
don't
Не
what.
передихають хлопці.
What's that southern heat?
Тільки коли міняються з позиції, відпочивають. А загалом працюють і працюють. На користь нашої батьківщини.
Let's see. Sadly, I don't know if that was an MT-12 Rapira or what. It looks like a Rapira. It looks like they're loading the M101 again. Firing. Dang! Alright, I didn't expect that from an M101, but that was impressive.
Must have been like the Fat Man, the mini nuke.
Буває,
They
що
really were firing a mini nuke out of that thing.
декілька пострілів зробить, а буває так, що більше 100 пострілів на добу.
Спитав вообще?
Як є часто, трохи дрімаю. Ну, так, все составляється на дежурки, мусить дежурити, якщо є буде команда бою, щоб всіх збудити і скоренько до пушки. Та я отак працюю круглосуточно. Досить цікаво. От десь молоді хлопці йдуть добровільно служити, у яких ще немає ні дітей, не оставили, так сказати, після себе нічого. Вони йдуть служити. А деякі ухилянти. Ну, я бачу так, що потрібно відпустити, напевно, на молодих хлопців, щоб вони продовжили свій рід, а вже батьки, які мають багато дітей і які мусять виконувати цей обов'язок на захист своїх же дітей, щоб вони допомагали нам в цей нелегкий час.
We see
Ну,
them
не
continue
знаю,
to give that thing a little bit
правильно,
of heat.
неправильно, але тут на позиції мене община 20 років. Артилерія, боги війни. Краще з кращих.
Actually, that is an anti-aircraft gun right there. I don't know what kind, but you can see the anti-aircraft mount for it. But that's the end of that clip, and really neat to see the border guards using some hodgepodge artillery and getting some pretty effective results from what we could tell. Meanwhile, we also got to see the Ukraine destroyed a Russian tank in the area. There's the tank. It's already smoky, because it's on that dirt road. And here comes the drone. It's just gently making its way down. Of course, the signal's a little rough, but that Russian tank's about to be rougher. Boom! Right in the engine bay. Damn! And they got it. And that thing is on fire. And we see it coming to a stop. The crew is, of course, going to bail out, and the tank will be abandoned and then burned down. Someone said, Matthew, is there any news on the war of Ukraine on here? Like, we're not covering it live right now. It's like, look at this dude.
The answer to this question would be yes. Yes, we do. Right here.
It's like you're literally watching it. But moving on from that, we also got to see the 2nd Guard Battalion repelling a Russian assault near the area of Verbove, I believe. Well, not Verbove, I'm so sorry. It's, what the hell? Lukyantsy, there we go. I don't know why I was getting that confused with Verbove. Oh, yeah, and copyrighted music all the way! Pull an LSA in the chat for the copyrighted music. But we can see them here moving around this little creek, this water feature, as they call it. And we can see them hanging out in the trench here. That's a nice M4. You see them reloading.
I like how they built a nice, like, dirt shelf up there to, like, contain all their ammo. That's a nice little spot. Oh, he's going to shoot right over it, too.
Dude, how convenient.
Man, one wrong move and bam! The box is going up.
Oh, and some artillery just landed nearby, but they're good. And we see him now moving an RPG down the line, probably to fire at the Russians here in a second. We now see our riflemen once again taking aim and firing at the Russians again, those pesky Russians.
Those pesky Ruskies, блядь, they are causing all of these troubles in our country, блядь. We have to get rid of them. Send them back home, блядь. Send them away.
And we see him getting the rifle back up again and continuing to fire. And then getting down for a second. Oh, they have multiple little shells made in the dirt right there. That's actually kind of cool. I like that.
Nice Ukrainian design. They could go into nice wooden cabinetry when they're finished with this war.
And we see something smoking over there. It looks like the Russians are cooking brisket. The brisket is themselves, but it looks like they didn't have that good of a time trying that attack.
The Ukrainians should be like, hey, here's some sweet baby rice, and throw it over there to them.
Man, make sure to lather up nicely, blad. You're going to cook like Thanksgiving turkey, blad. But we also got to see a Russian supply truck getting hit near Vovchansk as well. Here comes the drone. Oh, blad. And then they hit it dead on the nail, knocking it out.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. But with that, we're now moving on to our next clip down near Vovchansk, where we got to see that the 3rd Brigade, the actually 2nd Mechanized Infantry Battalion of the 3rd Brigade, was recapturing some positions. We hear him laying down that heat as this guy is trying to get himself unstuck from that branch, and he finally did.
Рух! Мы подходим, Федя, ты нас видишь?
You see them continuing to lay down fire.
Плюс. Вейк! Прикрой аккуратненько. Смотри, вот так, прям вот так. На дерево, туда. Плюс, двигаем.
And we hear the fire still coming in as the firefight continues on down this tree line.
Давайте, середина, правый флаг, движение.
Ooh.
Wow, these bullets are going right over their face.
Плюс, и по нам открыт огонь с правой посадки, прием. Очередью башит. Малюк накладывает себе турникет, как принял.
Плюс, красава. Компот, скажи, именно с трассы ведется вогонь, чи именно с толстой посадки справа?
Ведется огонь с толстой посадки справа, пулеметными очередями, плюс контакт спереди, также пулемет.
Компот, як тільки перебіжите, зразу від посадку метрів 20 по ліву руку будуть, блядь, 2-3 підерські.
That's crazy. The rounds are literally flying right over his head, maybe a few feet
все
away.
еще ведется огонь, возможно, метров 50-100.
And he's calm as a cucumber while it's happening, too. A true soldier.
Да, плюс.
Плюс, братан, походу нашли, зараз будемо їбати.
Делаем движение?
Да. Что там по пулику, блядь? Все, рух. Аккуратно там, вей.
Oh! Dude, I just saw one of the bullets kick up dirt right there in front of the camera. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing the 3rd Brigade conducting actions against the Russians in this area. Meanwhile, we got to see that some very close quarters combat footage from inside of a destroyed school in Vovchansk. We see him riding in. And we now see them in the school and putting down that heat. You see this guy propping up his RPG. A douche, and he hit the Russians dead on. He then starts running back. We see that he filled the room with backblast. Very fun. We now see him firing a machine gun at the Russians, just holding down the trigger. I mean, he's just pouring it on them. Now you see him loading a GP-25 rifle grenade launcher. Dunk. And
now look at that technique right there. That was called the I don't even know what you'd call that, but he was doing a good one.
Bro, that's called the Miami Gangsta.
Man, I guess you called it the street sweeper.
Dude, that's what you do with like a Mac 10 or something, you know? Like you just hold it around the corner like that and pull the trigger. And Greg V, that one got crushed, in case you were wondering. From what we know, it got crushed.
Oh, the Dagestan uprising? Yeah, that's done with.
Yeah, that one was a one-and-done deal. It really took the Russians' time and attention away for a bit, for like about a week, but it ended up inevitably getting crushed. But it still sustained some losses for the Russians and some pretty high losses for the insurgents.
There's a possibility it might brew back up, though, in the future. You never really can tell, because like movements like that, they just don't lose steam overnight. Like, they always return over and over and over.
Oh, me personally, I would agree with you. It is not ended. That will flare up again. Kind of like the Ingushettian Liberation Army always flares up here and there, but it's not a constant, ongoing thing. But the tensions are rising in that area. Clearly, there's a lot of ethnic tensions going on, which usually end up being long-lasting. But with that, that's the end of that clip. Really need to see that kind of close quarters fighting inside of Vovchansk, and once again showing the heavy actions that the Ukrainians are taking. Meanwhile, down in Kremenna, we also got to see the Russians shelling some Ukrainian positions, filmed by a Ukrainian himself. It's looking like Verdun out here. Oh!
В житті буває нахуй.
Казав, давай дочекаємося.
Ну, блядь, буває нахуй. Що зробиш?
And with that, that's the end of that clip. Really interesting to see that kind of shelling at night. And then we also got to see the Ukrainian border guards destroying Russian forces in this area as well. Well, you see him getting ready. You now see them moving their bomblets around that they're going to be mounting to their drones and then getting ready to drop. I don't really know if those are bomblets anymore or if those qualify as full-scale bombs, but there it goes.
Is that a Baba Yaga Bliat?
Baba Yaga Bliat! And let's see if it is. Yeah, I would count that as a Baba Yaga. That was a fairly big explosion. Oh!
Oh, Baba Yaga.
Man, they're crisping them down there like a nice rotisserie.
Man, you remember when we saw the whole Baba Yaga like lore and all that stuff from Russia, and they were like the Russians get turned on by Baba Yaga.
What?
You remember that? There was like some Russians that said they got turned on by Baba Yaga.
Oh yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, that was weird, dude. Like,
yeah, that was so weird. Every time we mentioned Baba Yaga, I remember that like weird like talk they were doing. I was like, oh dear, I don't like Baba Yaga's a mixed bag with that one.
Man, I think that was so traumatic for me to even talk about. I just completely buried that in the back of my head. Thanks for bringing that back up so I can remember that, man. But moving on from that and into our next clip, down in the area of Bakhmut near Ivanivsky, we did get to see the Ukrainians hitting a T-80 BVM. Rug Draggy. That's the unit, by the way. It's the Rarug. And we can see that the target is locked and the missile is inbound. Oh, and they rewinded for a slow-mo replay. Dude, the Russians, when they see Baba Yaga, they're like, okay, hear me out. Like,
oh, man, we are not hearing you out. Nobody's hearing you out on that one.
Man, they do like the little like hand rubbing thing that the fly does when it like lands on something. You know what I'm talking about? They're like, hello, Baba Yaga. Yeah, it's like, get the hell.
Or when the fly spots a new grift. Oh man, that looks like a nice juicy grift, and they're like, hear me out. No, we're not hearing you out. Forget it.
Oh man, another free vacation on the back of thousands dying per day. I love it. Pay me or something like that. But we also got to see the Russians getting plastered by Stugnas. Check this out. I wish I could have unmuted that, but ding! Oh! The lead vehicle is out and about. But with that, we're now moving on into our next clip in the Bakhmut area, where we also got to see some Colombian forces that are actually in the 93rd, the Carpathian Sich Brigade, the fighting 93rd. We've never seen Colombian volunteers in any unit rather than the International Legion, so this is actually a first for Colombians.
En Ucrania, somos Comando de Fuerzas Especiales entrenado en tierra, aire y mar. Pertenecemos al batallón número 49 Karpaz-Kashi de Ucrania. Aquí estamos con 100% con valor y gloria, con mística, con energía al 100. Por eso queremos darle un saludo de felicidad y de alegría a todo el pueblo ucraniano, que acá estamos los colombianos luchando por ustedes. Somos máquinas de guerra, milicia viva, al 100% con valor y gloria. ¡Viva Ucrania! ¡Viva, ¡Viva Ucrania!
I gotta say, I respect
those
that
guys got some spirit behind it.
Yeah, man, he was like giving like a little battle speech, man. He's like, we're battle tested, tried and true. We're gonna get him. I was like, dude, I respect that guy. He's got some energy. And so, mad respect for Colombia. I gotta love the Colombians out there fighting for Ukraine. Moving on from that and into the area of New York, we also got to see a drone taking a look at New York. Start spreading the news. But anyways, we can see New York right here. And of course, it's a bit of a battlefield at this point. But that is what the front line is. Luckily, all the civilians have moved out a long time ago. But we can see it's starting to get a little bit close to being a battlefield. The Russians are about a mile or a mile and a half outside the city right now. And we see them looking towards the central area of New York. Matthew, that doesn't really look like New York, Matthew.
Man, this looks like Central Park, maybe. They're flying over.
Maybe.
Over there on the right, and that sort of like that hellscape right there. It could be downtown.
Man, that could be. That might be. And we can see what appears to be the railroad station right here.
Oh, dearie me. New York does have quite a few railroad tracks running through the center.
Oh, look, it's the Long Island Railroad, or something like that.
Oh, dear. Is this your house?
I think that man is dying. No, it's Finn. But anyways, that's the end of that's the end of the clip right there. And we're now moving on into the area behind the lines near Avdiivka, where we got to see that the Russian Ural was destroyed. It is apparently a Ural 63704-0010, a Tornado U. We haven't seen this Ural designation a lot. I actually don't know a lot about the specific truck, but it was blown up, and that is wonderful to see. Moving on from that and into our next clip, a little bit behind the lines, we also get to see a Bradley firing on the Russians in the 47th Brigade. And so here's the clip. They just roll it. And they popped a shot. And another. I gotta tell you, the noise in the Bradley, it's like it's riding on air. It's so quiet in this thing. Man, I think they can put this thing in for a noise award.
Turn it up, I can't hear.
What's that, Matthew? I can't hear you over the sound of how quiet and luxurious this Bradley is.
Turn up the volume, I can't see what's going on.
What? I can't hear you.
I said turn up the volume, I can't see what's going on.
Man, me either. Like it was so quiet I just couldn't see. But still, very interesting clip. Good to know the 47th Brigade is still using the Bradleys. And meanwhile, we also got to see that the Ukrainians struck an ammo depot somewhere in southern Donetsk. And here's the clip from the 33rd Brigade. And there it is. And they had to show that camera on that gimbal. They had to show them launching that camera on that gimbal. Oh, dang, what a trick. What a trick. And then they hit the ammo depot. And did it start cooking? Oh, it started cooking quick.
Whoa.
Whoa, Jack. Whoa. But with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Very interesting to see. And moving on from that and down near Mikilske, we got to also see a Russian road trip. On the road again. Or, you know, however that song went. But here's the clip. I know people don't like hear me singing, so I only do like a few words and then end it.
You know, on the road again, or anyways.
Look, on the road again. Oh! Oh!
Oh, shoot.
And he got thrown off.
Man, he's on the road again, literally.
Shimmy, shimmy! Shimmy, shimmy!
And what was that, a pack of C4 on the ground?
No, like he just picked up the pack.
Look, there it is, he's holding it.
What is that? I don't know what that is.
Oh, they're full-scale panicking.
Shimmy, shimmy! Dude, whenever I freak out, I'm just gonna yell at people, shimmy.
Man, they're gonna act like they just didn't get killed just right then.
Man, this ATV is so back heavy, you can even see right here when they're driving off that there's no weight on the front tires. They're like kind of just like riding like a bicycle. Just look. Look at that. a crash is inevitable at that point. But with that, we're now moving on from Tony here, who's going to kill everyone in a minute. And we're now moving on into Uruzhane, where we also got to see the Russians apparently made a small counterattack and were able to partially retake Uruzhane. It's not that big of a deal because there's still Staromaiorsk right over next door to the west. But there they are. Let me make sure it's perfectly oriented over this bale of shit. There we go. It'll get blown away in like 3 hours by a Ukrainian drone, but we have to make sure it's perfect. Boy, and there he goes. He walk away. We also got to see that, sadly, a Ukrainian main battle tank was lost in the city today. It appears to have had a ammo detonation, and so here's the clip. The tank is right down there. And we see them zooming in as the tank careens off of the road. It's right now up off camera. And we can see that there is an ongoing fire. And then we can see that the ammo begins to detonate. A little unfortunate. It's sad to see Ukrainian losses like this. But nevertheless showing that sometimes the front line isn't all a cakewalk and roses. It is a difficult thing, and Ukraine is constantly fighting for their ongoing survival. But nevertheless, it is good to know that Ukraine was able to advance to Uruzhane quite some while ago and hold it for a year at this point without it being ever even close to being retaken by the Russians up until this point. Meanwhile, down in Mariupol, we got to hear that there were 5 explosions that reportedly happened near the Mariupol airfield. We did see smoke rising from the airfield, and we are believing that a Russian helicopter air wing may have been hit near that area. We haven't gotten any additional information, however, to be able to confirm that assumption. With that, we're now going to be moving on from the area of Mariupol and a little bit further on and into the area of Kherson, where we got to see a Russian drone trying to observe some Ukrainian fishermen, and it ended up getting the fish. Check this out. That is a fish.
Man, that must have been a heavy fish because it like knocked the thing around quite a bit.
Dude, that guy's got a throwing arm. Someone put him into the damn MLB. Like, it's like, that's pretty good. By the way, these are not Ukrainian combatants. These are Ukrainian fishermen. You can see right here by the absolute anger in this man's face that this drone is ruining his fishing day. Dude, he said, "Would you like halibut?" It just throws it straight at the drone. But with that,
those damn carp.
Those damn carp. But moving on from that, we also got to see that down in Sevastopol, it was a normal day at the beach in the middle of a war zone. Here's the clip. And we got this woman howling like some kind of a dog. And then we can see the helicopter making its way to its helipad just right off of the beach. And that's the end of the clip.
That's like seconds away from disaster with that one right there, with those umbrellas and everything flying in the air. Like, that could go so bad.
Yeah, it's like, it's a little tough for them. But moving on from that and up to Kyiv, it's time for us to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 870 of the war. And so, without further ado...
Oh, we have a special speech. A real speech. Wait a minute, he's in... Oh, this is what someone was saying earlier. I think this is in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Interesting. Very... I would have to believe so, because it's got the mountain thing in the background. So... this is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy from today. I don't even think we're going to need subtitles. I'm hoping we don't, but here's the speech.
Thank you so much, Governor Cox, esteemed governors, and all present here. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you who really cares about protecting life. These days, I have been in Washington. I visited the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation, and I was in the United States Congress speaking with representatives of both parties in both chambers. And I was at the White House and the NATO summit meeting with the President Biden. At each of these meetings, I thanked America, all our friends in America and all Americans who support Ukraine, our people, our freedom, our independence in this terrible war started by Russia. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you. Unfortunately, there are different wars in the world, but this is a war where it's absolutely clear what is good and what boundaries evil crosses. This is one of the most transparent battles between good and nothing wrong before God and people, and all the pain our country suffers is only the result of Russia's criminal actions and sick desires, only its unprovoked and unjust aggression. So it's so valuable that so many people and countries have united to help us to save our freedom, and thus the common human understanding that evil must always lose. What else would our world rely on if evil did not lose and if good people did not unite in battles against what threatens any life and any values? Of course, everyone does what they must, and I have said many times that we do not ask the United States and other partners to fight for us. We do not ask for your boots on the ground. The only thing we ask for is sufficient support, air defense systems for our cities, weapons for our men and women on the front line, support in protecting normal life and rebuilding. This is all we need to withstand and drive Russia from our land, and to send strong signal to all other potential aggressors which are watching. And we truly receive such support, and I'm grateful for this. Thank you again. Thank you. And yes, we receive it from American friends, from dozens of countries. Of course, Americans' leadership is indeed felt. And we receive it from many just ordinary people, communities, companies from different parts of the world, and everyone who does not remain indifferent truly protects life. As it has been said, the one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and each will be rewarded according to their labor. Today, I especially want to personally thank you for your support. The state of Utah, other states, many American hearts, and many American communities, all those who do not want and will not allow evil to prevail. Dear friends, many of you have probably heard or seen in the media about the recent Russian missile strike on a children's hospital some days ago. And this direct hit on one of the hospital buildings, and this could not have been just a coincidence. Children who, with the help of doctors, are trying to overcome terrible diseases such as cancer and heart diseases, found themselves on the street amidst ruins, and somewhere trapped under the debris. The hospital, the name of this hospital, by the way, Okhmadit, one of the best children's hospital, not only in Ukraine, but in all of Europe, was significantly damaged. And we are now working to quickly restore its operations and ensure that children can be treated in other hospitals. Cancer does not wait for the Russians to stop bombing our cities. And children need treatment, need it now. Children also need to go to school, and their parents need to feel at least basic safety to be able to live, be able to work, and provide for their families. Just think about the numbers. Russia destroyed nearly 160,000 of civilian objects, just 130,000 homes, 3,000 schools, 700 medical, and 170 churches. Who are they? All of this presents us with a huge range of tasks, and many of them will be resolved within communities very close to the ground. And that is why we so deeply appreciate when our friends from around the world come to Ukraine to see everything for themselves. Of course, speak the truth about what they have witnessed, help rebuild all that is very necessary for a normal life, and personally tell everyone who has not seen such a war that good must always triumph in war. To make this happen, to ensure the true victory of good, your voice, each governor, each community leader, all pure hearts is crucial. And I invite all of you to visit Ukraine and to see our people, our struggle. And I'm proud of our people and what Ukrainians are achieving now. Believe me, together we can achieve much more for all of us, for our countries, for our communities, for our people. I invite you to build people-to-people connections that will last forever. And we already see Yuda's contribution to rebuilding our country, and you have helped thousands of people, and such help can be help for millions of people and for the cause of good in general, which rewards everyone, regardless of where they live, because we all share the same values, and we do not want war to disrupt life anywhere. Thank you for your support, and I wish you fruitful work, productive discussions, of course, at these meetings, and I hope that together, Ukrainians and Americans, we will prevail. God bless America and Americans. Slava Ukraini.
And Herom Slava.
And Herom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 870 of the war. And it is time for us to move on into the next segment of this stream. Actually, way later than normal. It's actually 11:20. The news has been going on for 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is actually exactly 40 minutes overtime, meaning that y'all have gotten the double and triple dipping of news tonight because we ended the stream short last night. And so it is time for us to move on into all of those super chat questions that have been thrown in tonight and all of the live chats that we possibly can fit in as well. Hopefully all of them. But with that, Matthew, take it away, because before we even get to those questions, I understand that we have a very interesting poll that has been thrown up and a lot of people have really weighed in on it. So what do we got?
All right, so moving into the final question segment of the night, we do have that one poll left to address, and it says, China is holding military drills with Russia along China's southern coast, and the question is the Russia-China alliance, is it gaining strength? 53% said yes, China is 100% with Russia, while 21% said no, the drills are pretty much meaningless in regards to the question, and 18% said, that's growing somewhat stronger, yes. And in my opinion, I would say the Russia-China alliance is as strong as it's ever been. It's a quote-unquote no-limits alliance, and I think it's always been that way ever since they've agreed to it. Nothing's ever changed, and also to me, it's somewhat naive to think that China is not supplying Russia in fighting the war in Ukraine. I think China is very complicit with Russia's aggression, and even though they try to go through great lengths to hide it, it is pretty much right there in the open if you really want to see it. So I'm with the 53%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I believe that Russia, and this is, man, this sounds so stupid, actually, but I have to say it. I believe Russia is trying to get with China by being involved in these war games and military exercises with China, because they're trying to show that they're getting more and more involved in the Chinese sphere, and that they're more than happy of doing joint military actions with them. I think that's what they're doing, because if anyone's jockeying for anyone's time and attention right now, the Russians will be with the Chinese, because the Chinese are the larger economic and military power in between the two. So, in my honest opinion, I would have to say that the Russians are 100% trying to get with the Chinese and be their friend and get that renminbi. You know what I mean? That sweet, sweet, precious renminbi, which no one trades in anywhere in the world except for China's butt buddies. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are now on into them questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the first super chat here is going to go to Andy L, who threw in a very generous $100 donation, and huge shout out to Andy for that very generous support. And of course, everyone knows that Andy L is a long-time channel legend. We appreciate that very much, and sadly, no comment to address. He left us some super stickers though, and the last one that was put in was the YouTube gaming console controller saying super effective. And I'll tell you what, I think it is super effective, and thank you very much, Andy. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Andy L, and helping this channel to keep on running. One of our viewers from Texas, just like Samuel, Matthew, in the live chat. Did you see that a moment ago?
Samuel?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Samuel asked, Enforcer, where do you live? And I said, at home. that was my answer. Then Samuel said, dude, I'm just wondering because we're in the same time zone, because he's in Texas. So to answer your question, Samuel, we're in Alabama. But actually, funnily enough, you are from the same state that Andy L is from. Y'all are both Texan members of the Lee Spring Army, which is incredibly cool to know. And I gotta say, thank you so much once again, Andy L, for that massive, unbelievable support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because while you didn't throw in a comment, the support does mean a lot, and it helps this channel to be possible day in and day out. You know that, Andy L, because we say that like every single day. But we're still so appreciative of the support, and I got to thank you so much once again for always enjoying this channel and being a part of the small group of people who support this channel to help it to keep on running. Right now, tonight, 2 hours and 20 minutes into the stream, 55,000 people have watched this live stream. And at the peak tonight, according to YouTube right now, 7.1 thousand people have been here. That'll probably be updated into 8.1 thousand tomorrow after YouTube gets their crap together, because now they're doing that like every day. But beyond that, there was a lot of people here tonight, and many of these people, tens of thousands, really almost all of them, get to watch this stream and this news ad-free and sponsor-free every single day, thanks to the support and efforts of an incredibly small part of the Lee Spring Army that supports this channel every single night in the Super Chats. If it wasn't for that incredibly small group, this channel's way of existence, with ad-free, sponsor-free live streams that are completely free to watch, and you do not have to spend a single cent or a single second of your time to get to the news, wouldn't be able to happen. And that's why I got to thank you so much, Andy L, for your unbelievable and massive support, because if it wasn't for folks like you, individual members, just the very few of y'all in the Lee Spring Army that actually support this channel, we wouldn't be able to make this possible on a day in and day out basis. And so, thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, Matthew, you know something that I just saw right now, and it kind of clicked in my head that we need to investigate this a little bit further while we're talking about Texas and Andy L and Samuel, both in the live chat being from Texas, is, do you notice something about New Mexico?
What about it?
You know how, like, New Mexico is like a perfect square, right, until you get to, like, the southern border?
Almost, yeah.
It isn't.
Oh.
Look at that.
Texas got some extra land, did they?
Dude, it looks like they did. Like, look at that. How far is that? Oh, they made like a little tourist
Man,
thing
look
here.
at these crop circles out here, man. Are you seeing those crop circles?
Ooh, it's aliens! Oh!
Before anybody gets any ideas about, oh, you don't know what that is? Yes, I know. That's the irrigation for the watering system, whatever, going around in a circle. Yes.
So Texas juts into New Mexico by a whole 2 miles. I didn't know that. Like, I actually thought, y'all, that New Mexico and Oklahoma, I thought that Oklahoma's border actually was perfectly flush with Texas, but also, Matthew, I saw something that really grosses me out down here. Texas
What's
isn't
that?
flush with Oklahoma here either. Look at this. Right here. Right there. No. We don't want that. Right here is the border of Texas. And then down here is Oklahoma. So there's this little 56-foot segment where Texas just has this little northern area. Like right here. Why?
Well, that's
like,
kind of interesting. That's weird. It's not good for OCD people. I can tell you that. They should have made it nice and square.
They should have. Like, that is ew. Brother, brother, I don't like I don't like that at all. And then let's see here. What is this? Why? Okay, wait, hang on. I know why they did that. The surveyor screwed up, and some of them started to veer off, so then they had to meet in the middle, and this is where they met. But, brother, brother, hang on. But then the 4 corners over here, it actually is the 4 corners. So, they got this one right. But the whole thing with Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico's border up here, this little area right here, this is truly a mess. The worms! But beyond that.
Oh, no, not the worms, man. The worms are back. Oh, no, the worms. Listen, Jack, if you got worms, go to the docks. You know what I mean?
Worms! You eat them, but or something like that. Anyways. What are these? Are these oil rigs? They are. Pump away, baby, pump away. Dang, that's actually a really big field right there. Look at that.
That is a big field. You know who the top, there's actually 2 brothers, believe it or not. They're some of the top oil producers in America. Do you know who they are?
No.
It's freaking frack.
Oh, just get out of here.
No.
Yeah, all right. Everyone, y'all just saw
I couldn't even hold it together saying that one. I couldn't even keep a straight face.
Y'all just saw the end of Enforcer Matt on this channel. He's not coming back after that one. We're going to have to let him go. But dang.
Whoa, Jack, listen. I'm not leaving.
What the hell are you talking about? I'm about to go to Andrew's place. That's my place, by the way. What the hell are you talking about? But let's see here. I'm really looking for border irregularities at this point. Like, I don't get this part. I don't get this part of Texas. Like right here near El Paso. Like, why? I don't get it. Anyways, this whole thing with the Texas-New Mexico-Oklahoma border has really weirded me out tonight, and I'm personally not in my comfortable place mentally, so we're going to have to move on from that. That's one of the big no-nos, Matthew, of why we can't go and live in Texas, is because that little northern border area right here is a little bit wonky.
Now I'm going to call cap on that. Texas is wide open. Texas is an option.
Not for me. But anyways, with that.
Listen, Jack, I just got to say, the people in the live chat, if they all want me gone, I'm not leaving. I'm telling you what. Anyways.
What the hell are you talking about? But anyways, also, someone said, if you look at European borders, they're not straight. And that's right. But they follow natural geography, which is what really makes them so special and nice, because they make sense for the most part. Like, for example, the Belgian border. Let me zoom in on that. See how there's, like, no definable reason that this border should be shaped that way? This is literally just an artificial border that was made. But if you go to Germany...
follows that hedgerow.
Huh?
What's that? Follow that hedgerow.
I think the hedgerow was grown because it's the border. Like,
I know.
But let's see here. Like, for example, down here on the French-German border, this follows the Rhine River. So this border makes sense. But and also a lot of borders in America make sense. Like, for example, Alabama's border with Mississippi. It literally just follows nothing. It just is in a straight line for no reason. But if you come over here to the other side of the state, right over here, this actually follows the... It follows this waterway. The Walter F. George Reservoir. It looks like George Costanza finally got something named after him, but sadly I don't know the
Reservoir.
At the reservoir. I mean, I went to Kroger. Man, I tell you what. Oh my goodness. Oh wait, hang on. It's the Chattahoochee River. How in the hell did I not know that, Matthew? Because we have joked about that river before. But beyond that, some borders in America make sense. Others don't. And I don't know what happened up in the northwestern area of the top of Texas. But, you know, it is what it is, I suppose. But still, thank you so much once again for support ADL and helping this channel to keep it running. That massive support does help to make this channel possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here, while I get rid of this poll, I forgot to dismiss earlier. Let's see, end poll. There it goes. It's gone now. But anyways, moving on to our next one here, we have a $20 super chat from Kid Rock 966, and thank you very much, Kid Rock, for that support as always. He said, "I'm chipping into the coffee fund and LSA."
Hey, thank you so much for chipping into that coffee fund, Kid Rock 966. Folks like you help us to make it possible that we are hydrated and caffeinated on air. And that is such an important part of every single night. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Kid Rock. And long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, I hate to inform the audience that sadly the Chipotle fund, if there ever was one, that fund has collapsed, is closed, and the FDIC's had to step in and take over the assets because the Chipotle fund has gone bust. We will never have a Chipotle fund ever again. Just a PSA. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, we have one from Nick Parks, who puts in a $20 donation. Huge shout out to Nick for that support. He said, "Great job, lads, and I'm glad to hear that you're both back to full strength. And thank you." He said, "I hope this helps with coffee and things, and please take one from the chat."
And thank you so much for the support, Nick Parks, and thank you so much for supporting the channel and bearing with us last night. We were both in very bad shape last night. We got off air. Matthew looked like he was dying, and I felt really bad. My headache was terrible. So I thank you so much for hanging with us and hoping that we're better. We're a lot better tonight. Both of us are tip-top shape. And something, I'll be honest with you, now that it's past tense, one thing that did aggravate me a little bit last night, Nick, by the way, you're certainly not one of them. I thank you so much for having patience. It's fine that people don't really want to have patience with us, but one thing that does annoy me is that we run this thing 6 days a week, like without break, ever, hardly, unless if there's no news or unless if something has literally blown up behind the scenes. We don't ever take a break. And so we run this thing 6 days a week. No one else does that on YouTube. No one else probably ever will in this category work that hard trying to make sure that they cover news. And then last night, I'm like, we're sick. We're going to be rounding out early. And we ended up having to ban a few people because they're like, okay, you just being an ass about it or something. And I was like, how in the world are we being, like, I'm just trying to explain why it's in early, because if we didn't, then people are going to be going, oh my God, did they get in a fight? Or is someone dying? What's happening? You know, and then...
Man, Dims was the bots.
Yeah, well, Dims was the bots. Some of them, I would say 2 of them, I knew were not bots. But I was still like, what the hell? I was like, you know, like, we've been here 6 days a week. I don't know how people get where they can take things for granted, because it's like, you know, you want to find any other channel that runs 6 days a week, every week, without stopping for 870 days. There isn't another one, so have luck with that. And I don't know why some people have positions like that, you know, because it's like, aren't we entitled to 6 days? You know, and everyone's always like, you know, take a day off, recover, recuperate. And that's one of the reasons why we can't, because the truth is that there is a pretty okay contingent of people out there who could give a damn about us taking days off. And if we did, they would just go find someone else, and then they crap on us because we would take days off. And so then we end up having to just run this thing nonstop forever. And that's really why I can't leave this house or really do anything long distance, like a vacation or anything. Because, you know, simply put, I literally cannot leave the house for more than a few hours because I have to be back here and ready to put together a show. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much once again for supporting Nick Parks and helping this channel to keep it running. Thank you for supporting the Coffee Fund. And we will make sure to get a live chat sponsored by none other than Nick Parks. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this question right here is going to go to Fayuma. He has a question about that Russian jet that we saw crash earlier, somewhere outside of Moscow, I think. He said, is the Russian plane that crashed, does it operate by fly-by-wire?
I think it does. Let me go check.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would be surprised if it wasn't fly-by-wire, because if it's a quote-unquote modern jet, even by Russian standards, it should be that.
In Russia, it replaces the aging Tu-134.
Yeah. Oh man, I would say that's a quantum leap, like from that old thing to this new one. And the new one didn't look too wild, but like it's a huge jump from the old one.
And also, Matthew, it replaces the Yak-42. Yeah, it's like, golly, these are rough. Like, these are some rough aircraft, especially this one. I would put money on it that this is a converted bomber, especially because of that front nose cone the way it is. I have to find that out. Let's see here. Let's see. The original version featured a glazed nose design, and like certain other Russian airliners, including the Tu-154, it can operate from unpaved airfields, pretty much shitholes. The best way to put it in Russia. Yeah, let's run a jet airliner off of a dirt airfield. That makes sense, right? Because we are such an advanced and in advanced communist utopia. This thing was developed from the Tu-124. They just take fat L's designing aircraft in the Soviet Union, dude. These are all ugly.
Man, they got the flag on the back tail wing thing, just like North Korea's got it on the back of those Koryo airlines things.
Dude, that's where they got the inspiration from, man. Like, it's like, no joke. Ew. That's the Czech airline. Ew.
Air Koryo.
And then we have this People's Liberation Army one that's, like, it appears that the glass is turned yellow, like piss yellow. But let's go back and look at that Tu-134, because who operates this thing? Former operators. North Korea actually operated some of these at some point and then retired them.
I'm not shocked by that at all. That's a junker right there.
Dude, this thing's got the schnoz. Dude, this thing comes up to you and he goes, rubles. it's like, man.
The rubles have sunk, kind of like the design on this plane has sunk.
Ugh.
Man, this is some ugly planes right here. Like, I knew Russia's design wasn't exactly on par, because everything in the design's kind of like, you know, a little bit brutal looking, but this is rough.
Dude, just in case you have to eject the passengers out of the back of the plane, you can use the front nose cone here like a bombardier to figure out where they're going to land. Like, just try and land them in a field or something if you throw them out. Oh, man. Terrible plane. But beyond that, I would assume that this plane is fly-by-wire. It would be weird that a modern aircraft wouldn't be made with fly-by-wire. Let me just type that in. Superjet 100 fly-by-wire. Let's see here. So flight-aware discussions. See here. I'm trying to see. So the Sukhoi Superjet 100 is fly-by-wire. That is something that it is. So I hope that answers that question fairly well. We finally got an answer to it. And I thank you so much once again for bearing with us as we looked at those hideous Russian aircraft. But it really makes me, Matthew, so interested in going through Russian aviation. Like, what other aircraft do they have?
Also, real quick, do you know how much crap we got tonight for like our little speculation about what happened to that plane that crashed? We got some crap from someone who claimed to be a flight trainer tonight in the live chat, and also someone who claimed to have been a pilot as well. They came in and were so violent. Like, one of them had to get banned. They were so violent. They're like, you're talking out of your asses. And I'm like, well, damn, like, we didn't say we were, like, dead on correct. It's like, this is our speculation. And they were like, it didn't crash because of a stall. It crashed because of a stall. I was like, well, that's what I said. And then they're like, you didn't say it the way I wanted to. I was like, okay, then, bye-bye.
Dude, every single community on the internet has, like, you know, those gun people, if you know what I mean, like the gun people who are a little bit too opinionated and they can't hear anything else rather than what they say exactly how they say it. It's like, rough. I hate to be
really. It's like if they would have just said, like, you know, I think you're wrong and here's why, and I'm a flight instructor, I've been like, okay, they probably know what they're talking about. Like, they probably know more than us, definitely. So we'll go with their opinion. But it's like, you don't have to get violent to prove that you're credible. It's like, damn. It's like, and then keep going deeper with it and
Man,
keep getting more
and,
violent.
and dude, in knowing people like that, if here's the thing, y'all, like with people like that, there's no winning, because if you actually sit there and you let them shit on you, and then you go, well, actually they're right, then they go, I had you quivering in your boots because you're wrong, you stupid bastard. Like, that's how they work. So there's no winning with them. If someone comes in like that, it's just an instant ban, because they're going, and then also on top of that, there's a power dynamic that they didn't develop where they think that they can just tell you everything and cuss you out until you agree with them, and that's a no-go on this channel. Such rude folks out there in the world, you know what I mean? But beyond that, I'm just trying to find myself some older Russian planes. We're going to go back to the Tu-134 really quickly, because I got to find that thing again. Where was that on this page? Here we go. All right. So, okay. There's got to be some other aircraft mentioned here. Oh! What is that?
Yeah. Great heavens.
Oh! Oh my god. Yo. Yeah. Wait a minute, hang on. That actually isn't that bad. That kind of looks like a Russified Dash 8, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, a little bit. It's not too bad for like a twin prop, but I'm not a huge fan.
I'm not really that big of a fan either. What? It was designed to replace the veteran piston IL-14, that ugly thing. Okay, hang on. Wait a minute. The Xi'an Y7. Okay, that's just the Chinese version. Variants, the Antonov 26, the 30. Oh, what is that?
Man, it's got like the honeycomb Cheerios, like cereal front nose on that thing.
Dude, that thing is Snoopy, dude. It comes out and it goes womp, 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 womp. It's like, what the hell? It's like, ew. Oh my lord. It's operated by the Ukrainian Air Force.
Oh, bless their soul.
My respect for the Ukrainian Air Force just plummeted because that thing is ugly. Oh my god. That is so bad. What else do they have? What other... Dude, look at this one. The engine, they were like, you know what? The engines being on the wings ain't that great. We got to put the engines above the wings. Like,
I think those engines might be a little bit too big for that plane. I think, like, they put like, those little small like bass boats that'll have like those massive like 1,000 horsepower like
yeah,
boat
like,
motors
and when they rev them up all the way, it like flips the boat over pretty much.
Yeah, it's like kind of like that. It's like, are these really meant for a plane this size?
Dude, I don't think they were. Like, I don't think they were at all. Developed into. Okay, so then they sized them down on the next model. But, jeez, dude, rough. Like, the Soviet aviation world is a tough place. Like, my lord, I want to find out more. So they have the IL-14, right? That was like kind of like the grandfather of everything, I guess, back in the day. Can we get to the IL-14 from here? No, just the Illinois routes. Why do people? What are on these Wikipedias? So people actually write about his highways in Illinois? Highways can't be that interesting. Like I hate to say it, but
it must be a story.
It must be like there was a lot of them though. Like I typed in IL and that was like everything that popped up. It was just Illinois highway something. But okay, so IL-14, we go from here. Let's see here. Developed from the Aleutian 12. Wait, this thing was developed out of something else. What the hell? Dude, these things
that's
are
like, you call that thing the super guppy right there. That thing's got way too much weight up front. It's looking a little bit wrong.
No,
you know
man,
that
you call
little
that thing
Disney
gold.
cartoon? Man, you know that Disney cartoon where the like it was the American like bomber plane and it was like, you gotta go find a job, and he went running around and stuff like that to all the different places to go find a job in the Air Force, and they wouldn't have them. It looks like that one.
Dude, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about, but I'll
pull it up. Wait a minute, let's see here.
No, it's
let's
copyright probably.
Oh damn, hold on. I gotta pull it up from my own knowledge. Disney cartoon, bomber plane, World War II. Let's see here.
I like comparable air.
I'm gonna keep looking for it though. You keep going ahead.
I'm Soviet commercial. Soviet aviation. Dang. They don't make this easy, do they? I'm going to take this off screen really quickly. Soviet commercial aircraft. Let's see if we can get a list.
Hey, Steven knows what I'm talking about. It looks like Disney's wiped it off the face of the earth like that cartoon. Also, they've gone through a lot of effort as well to wipe out all those old cartoons from like the World War II era and stuff like that, which had some kind of questionable stuff in them a little bit. Disney's totally wiped it out, it looks like. So I can't even like show y'all or tell y'all about it because they've erased it from history.
Dang, that's wild. But Matthew, I've been able to find a comprehensive list of civilian aircraft for us to laugh at from the Soviet Union and also from Russia. Okay, so I found one that I was getting a good laugh at. The IL-62.
That is, it looks like a cheap version of that McDonnell Douglas DC something. I can't remember the exact name.
Dude, it honestly looks like a supersized 717.
Maybe. I think it looks more like a MD, maybe an MD-80 or something like that.
But I like how they took the engines mounted up on the fuselage and just like, shit, put another 2 on there. Like, just make it double powerful. It's like that doesn't really seem like it makes sense. I'm sure it had massive safety issues. I don't even have to be sure of that. I just know. Let's see. Ooh, what is that? That is the Guppy.
Man, that's you know how they have the wide body aircraft today, like the Boeing wide body? This was the wide body.
Dude, that was the wide body. It's like that thing was wide.
Man, that boy thick.
Let's see. So now we got LA. So they didn't even make any actual civilian aircraft. So what about MiG? So wait a minute. You know what? I'm not even looking into that one. I know that's a joke. Okay. The Scat.
Man, you know, they have a Dodge Charger called a Scat Pack.
Dude, this thing looks like Scat. Look at that. Dude, this thing goes flying around and goes, it's not a tumor. It's like, dude, that thing is terrible looking. Wait, hang on. We finally have. What the hell?
Man, that is a hell of a nose.
Jeez, you know what that looks like, dude? That looks like one of those cars in the 30s that had like the extra long hoods. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that plane's got a honker.
Dude, that thing comes around, you know it's coming around because you just hear the whole way. It's like, jeez. Let's see here. So SU had to have some civilian aircraft. Okay, they had an aerobatic, an aerobatic, an aerobatic. Okay, they made a lot of aerobatics. What about this? No pictures? Ooh, it's a boxcar. Get away. Ew. Gross. The Superjet. And then they finally made the Superjet. Civilian aircraft.
Superjet.
Ew.
Oh.
Okay, crop
man,
dusters.
all this is Sukhoi design?
This is a Sukhoi crop duster. Now, crop dusters never really looked that good in my opinion, but this one is extremely ugly.
Man, I gotta tell you, Sukhoi might take the award for the worst designed company ever to exist.
This is a concept for a business jet? What are these, stupid? Look at that. Is that a ramp?
That's something that Kanye West would have shown somebody and been like, this is the new iPlane.
Dude, the S-21 would be capable of sustaining cruise at Mach 2, and much research and development has gone into the management of the troublesome transonic effects phenomenon associated with near Mach 1 airspeeds. As of 2012, the project has not received any funding for the 2013 to 2025 development period and appeared to be canceled. I would assume so, because that just seems stupid, doesn't it? Well, what do they have here? What the hell is that? What the hell is even that? That is like an A380 747 hybrid that they tried to come up with, and it failed, apparently, of course. Come on, there's gotta... Oh, dude, Tupolev is the one who was making all the... Oh, dude! Eardrums bursting on this one, dude. With the with the prop design, eardrums will burst.
Indeed. Oh, wait a minute. Tom Charles figured out which cartoon I was talking about, because I'm still on that, like still trying to think about it. It's Little Johnny Jet from Metro Goldwyn in 1953. It's a really super old one.
I know which
one. Like, pull that up. I think you can show a picture of that, maybe.
Let's see here. Yeah, let me go pull it up. Little.
Man, the copyright's got to be expired by now too. It's from 1953.
Well, you never know. I mean, oh, what the hell? Hang on, let me go to images. Okay, so You're talking about this, dude. Honestly, I want to cringe looking at this cartoon.
Yes, that one.
What the hell is this?
It's that one. It's like they got the little guppy plane right there. They got the father plane, the mother plane over there. Man, this was a whole series, or not a series, but it was a whole cartoon, like a whole spill about this thing. It was pretty good. I don't care what anybody says. I love the old cartoons. They don't make cartoons like this anymore. Yeah, it's a little cringy and a little bit weird and stuff, but it's just I love the old cartoons.
Well, man, why in the world is the female plane looking like that though? Stop.
Oh man, it got worse. It got worse. The female plane was down bad in the cartoon. Like a lot.
What?
Yeah, it was kind of strange. You had to kind of watch that part.
Why in the world did they stamp his ass? What is going on with this cartoon?
He got rejected, by the way.
Dude, this is how U.S. airmen look down on the Iraqis in the Gulf War from the bombers. Like it's like just dropping a GBU on their head. But anyways, yeah, this is a weird cartoon. This is a weird one. You know, I would scroll down. I'm really concerned about what we might find scrolling down because this one over here. That's concerning me a little about this cartoon. We'll look at this a little bit later on, you know what I mean? But still interesting for sure. But with that, we're going to stop our rabbit hole in the Russian civilian aviation. That's probably a good way to round it out in a very memorable way. But I still thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat, Nick Parks, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you who help to make these incredibly fun little segments possible. And with that, we are on to the next one. I know who the next one is. And so Matthew, what do we got?
And this one is going to go to LSA Rocks, who puts in a very generous $100 donation. Huge shout out to LSA Rocks for that massive support as well, and we appreciate it very much. He says, LSA Army, and I agree, we need to get an LSA flag on a building in Russia.
And that would be really cool, wouldn't it, LSA Rocks? That would put a target on Matthew and my head, but I think that would be a cool reason to have a target on our head. And so let's try and make that happen. If an LSA flag can somehow make it into Russia and then be flown and filmed, so that way there's proof of it, that would be incredibly cool. I think that would be great. And I have to agree with you, LSA Rocks. That is a ingenious idea. Well, actually, not an ingenious. It is a genius idea, and I back it up 100%. And so with that, thank you for the unbelievable, massive support once again to this channel and helping it to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here covering the news tonight. And so a massive thanks to you. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Susan Lowell, who puts in a $20 donation. It says, thank you for your discussion of F-16s and weak signals from the U.S. officials, and you're the best.
And thank you so much for the support, Susan Lowell, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I would have to say, thank you so much for enjoying my conversation on that. I would have to say, usually, and many, all of y'all know this, because y'all been here for 870 days, I have never made a comment on anything going on currently in the U.S. government. I never make a comment on it. We want to avoid we want to avoid anything even getting close to politics as best as we can. But to be entirely honest, well, I was very honest with y'all, and to continue to be honest with y'all right now, Susan, I'm not a big fan of really either direction that I'm currently seeing right now from either side in the U.S. government. I'm generally not a fan of both directions because one only goes halfway in supporting, and going halfway may as well be going no way. And then the other would possibly, from what we know, maybe give up some land in Ukraine, which is really going no way either. Both of them end up going really no way, and we don't end up achieving what America needs to achieve and what the Western world needs to achieve in Ukraine. And that has been a bit of a dilemma of mine in the background. Of course, many of y'all know that I'm not really a big fan of politics. I'm generally not a big fan because I generally do not find common ground with the mainstream ideas from either side, kind of like I laid out tonight. I believe that both of them really end up coming to the same end conclusion. It's just different ways of getting there. So it's kind of like saying, we're going to lose, but how are we going to lose? Which way do you like losing better? Do you like just giving up things immediately and just calling it that? Or do you like stringing everyone along for a couple of years and then losing anyways and then calling it that at the end and then moving on? That's really what I see at the moment. And that's something I'm just not a big fan of. I wish, to be entirely honest, that there was a way I could get a lot more involved currently in my beliefs and my ideas and trying to implement them on a national level or a national scale. But I'm only 22 years old, and to even run as a representative, I have to be 25 years old, and to be a senator or a president, I have to be 35 at the minimum age. And so really at this point, all I can do is really make sure to give you all the news, cover what's going on, and then maybe, very rarely, like tonight, which was the first time in 870 days, actually throw in an actual opinion or my thoughts on current developments and what I would want to do, which isn't really in line with either side. It's more so what I'd want to do. And that's kind of a bit of an issue as well, Susan, is that I'm not someone who likes to follow what other people say just because they say it. I'm not one of the people in this country who says, okay, well, I have this bad option and this bad option, but I like this bad option more, so I'm going to go with it. And then I'm going to just worship it and just run to the hills with the thing. I'm not really a big fan of that. I'm more so into looking at things in a common sense perspective and coming up with my own conclusions, like I did tonight, and telling you all about them and what I would do, which is completely opposite than either option that's currently out there right now. That would be my take, and so that's kind of an issue, and that's also something that I know will be a great challenge going forward. Is that heavily opinionated people like me don't really make it that far in a political field, because I will come forward with an idea that no one's really on board with, and then I have to try and get people on board, which is a much more difficult task than hopping onto an already pre-existing mainstream line of thinking and then maybe molding it a little bit differently, which is what a lot of people end up trying to do. And that is a little bit of the issue. The hope is, actually, to just throw this out there for y'all, the hope is that the Lee Spring Army would actually help out a lot with that, because with things I say like that, with what I would do as the President of the United States, or what I would want to see, I really hope that y'all will take that, just hold it near and dear to you, and then spread that around and get more people in on that idea, because I just don't really like either way that it's going right now, to be entirely honest. As far as foreign policy is concerned, I'm not a big fan. Now, of course, I'm going to make sure to not weigh in on domestic politics. That's an entirely other issue. But as far as foreign policy and diplomatic relations for the United States are concerned right now, I'm just not seeing anything I'm that happy with. And so thank you for listening to what I had to say tonight. In my opinion, and my take on how things should be done around the world is entirely different than both options at the moment. But I hope that a lot of people saw maybe some reason, maybe some semblance in it. Some people are scared. You know, some people are very scared when I say things too, like the United States shouldn't look to avoid escalation. Escalation sometimes is a good thing, and we need to push escalation. Some people get scared because they take that as we're going to go to war. And that doesn't mean we're going to go to war at all. It just means that we're going to be escalating and raising tensions. That could lead to a war, but the hope is that it won't. That's always the hope, is that these that attempts at escalation will lead to a diplomatic solution more so than war. But one has to always remember, the United States didn't get to being a global superpower with dozens of nations we call very close friends and major economic partners without shedding a lot of blood and a lot of hardships along the way. This hasn't been an easy path for America over its past 275 years of existence nearly. It's never been an easy path to take. It's never been an easy path for any country in the world who's been put in this position. And to be able to stay in this kind of a position, we have to be able to make sure that the United States is dedicated to being able to take the risks and possibly taking the consequences of being a world leader and wanting to maintain a sphere of influence like this. It's never going to be a cakewalk. It's never going to be easy. People will get hurt along the way. People might even die in the defense of this nation, in the defense of the things that we have been able to create around us. That is a part of what living in this world is largely as a nation, but we have to accept that sometimes on matters of principle and matters of our own interest, that is something that must be done, whether we like it or not. I don't like war. We cover war as a daily thing on this channel, and war is one of the most dangerous and destructive things, especially in the modern world, but sometimes one must understand that if the other side... Oh, go ahead.
Say what?
I heard you go, whoosh. I was like, what the hell is that?
I was coughing.
Oh, yeah, all I heard was, whoosh. But one has to understand that if the other side, if the Russians and the Chinese are willing to escalate to any end, to any point, to be able to get what they want, and we are more than happy to back off and give away as much as they want to stop a conflict from rising. By the time they're done, we're going to have nothing left. And so would y'all rather fight for what we have or give away everything that we have and have nothing left and then still be stuck in a terrible situation? I believe that fighting would be a better option at that point. But of course, hopefully it would never get to that. Hopefully the other side, the Russians, the Chinese, the axis of evil out there, would see that war is, of course, not a good option for them. It's going to be incredibly costly for all sides, and it would be better to resolve this with a diplomatic resolution than it would be by the sword. But I hope that that does address that incredibly well. And thank you so much once again for enjoying my input tonight, Susan. And thank you for saying that I'm the best. I'm not the best. I just like to throw out. I liked to have thrown out my own personal opinion tonight. I'm going to make sure to keep that very limited, though. That's probably the only time y'all are ever going to hear my personal take on things and how I would do things in a very concerted form on this channel for probably years from this point. But I still thank you so much once again in helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help this channel to be possible, help it to keep on running, and give me a voice, not only where I can just cover the news like we do every day, but also to throw out opinions like that. And so with that, thank you so much.
Also on the heels of that super chat, by the way, go to the likes tab on our Twitter page. I got 2 memes that we need to show the audience real quick. Show the top one first, and then show the second one second.
And let's see here. What the hell? Dude.
Show it.
Everybody gangsta until the Lancaster starts dogfighting. Dude,
Man.
this thing is dogfighting F-14? Like, what the hell?
Man, they sent in the bomber on that package to start fighting the fighter jet. That's crazy. Man, this is real packaging for a monitor, by the way. It's probably like from China or something.
No way.
Like they got the propeller bomber out here chasing the jet.
Dude, they don't just have a propeller bomber. They have like probably one of the most unmaneuverable World War II era propeller bombers chasing down a damn F-14. It's like, what the hell? Okay, so what's the next one we got? Oh, dude, I saw this. When you find out Hot Dog Man is taking an all-expenses paid vacation to a war zone under the guise of being a good person.
Also, by the way, that's the Italian Prime Minister scowling at Viktor Orban at some like event or something today.
Man, that is one hell of a look right there. My goodness.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, like she's really getting crazy with the look she's giving people. Like she cannot hold back like feelings she has toward people. Like she'll scowl at anybody she doesn't like right in front of their face with like no remorse at all.
Man, well, I mean, the Italians are very passionate people, man. Like that's just their way. Like they look inside the guy. Ah! It's like, hey, that's not bad though. You gotta appreciate that. She conveys a lot through her facial expressions. Very, very appreciative in a modern world, especially a modern diplomatic world. You know, very straightforward. Doesn't like someone, they'll let you know through their facial expression.
Don't let them play poker, though.
Dude, you do not want to you do not want to play poker being a person like that. But I'll be honest though, I would play against them because hell, I would be winning. I don't even know how to play poker, but I'd be winning if they have a face like that. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, let's see here. Man, I was looking for others, but still, this is good. Like this one, dude.
I was out here dying laughing. What the hell is that on the right?
That is some British officer in the Royal Air Force. I don't know who he is specifically, but
they aren't trying to like suggest that this is legit. Like this guy was actually a fighter bomber, like flying the Lancaster after Tomcats.
No, this never happened in history, man. This never happened. Like, by the time the F-14 Tomcat was in service, the Lancaster had been long retired for decades.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I'm just laughing at whoever came up with this artwork. Thought they were really cooking. They thought they were really cooking with this when they put the fighter bomber behind it.
Also,
hilarious.
Dude, let me show you something. You remember Little Einsteins, that show you used to watch as a kid?
Yes.
Okay. Let me show you something, dude. I never knew this, and I never realized it until later. But you know who the bad guy was in Little Einsteins?
Who?
A MiG-29. Like, no joke. Like, it was called Big Jet, and that was just the enemy of Little Einsteins.
Oh, damn. They were trying to tell the kids early. Like, this is the enemy. It's Russia.
Like, look. Big Jet. Like, Big Jet is mugging on him like right there. It's like, what the hell, dude? Look at
That's
that.
crazy. The Russians have been terrorizing everybody for ages, like even the kids in the cartoons.
Dude, and what's crazier is that this is an older model of the MiG. Like, this is like a MiG-29, like one of the base models that came out like when it was first introduced. Like, this isn't even like a MiG-29 SMT or anything like that, you know, because it would have like a pronounced hump. But
Gotta let those kids know who's the enemy.
like, look at that. Just look at that.
Is that a camera?
Yeah, dude, it has a flare pod attached to it.
Now I'm going to call cap on that. You'll never see the Russians putting a camera on a fighter jet because they don't want the war crimes caught on camera.
Man, I'm telling you what, man. And then after a long day, you have to get a little sip.
Oh yeah.
Like, man, that thing's like lapping up water like a dog. This is a DCS world, by the way. But man, I'm telling you what, I get a kick out of the little Einstein's antagonist being a MiG. Like, it's like, why a MiG? Like, they could have picked anything. They could have picked an Su-27 like this, but then they picked a MiG. I don't know why. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support, Susan Lyle, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Ed, who puts in a $20 donation, and huge shout out to Ed for that support as well. He said, "Hey, LSA, Irish Ed." He said, "I'm a red-blooded American. I'm glad to hear it. If you weren't red-blooded, that might be something to see the doctor about." But Ed says, "Thank God the LSA is strong. And also, you guys need to put Pimp Marmot on a shirt. A gold pimp chain is needed. And maybe text walk softly and carry a big pimp stick. LOL. I love you guys."
That is a good one. Man, everyone loved the Pimp Marmot. Like, everyone loved that thing. Let me go get it really quickly again. Also, Mandy, I think we're actually going to run overtime tonight. I guess that's going to pay everyone back for our very short stream last night. But Pimp Marmot is just great. Like, it's probably one of the funniest things we've done on the channel in the live chat segment. And I think, Matthew, we do need to make a shirt out of this thing. It's in high demand. A lot of people want this.
I think so. We should do that. Also, by the way, we have a shirt running right now, by the way. Bot be gone.
Oh, crap. Yeah, if you go to officialenforcerstore.com, link in the description below, you can get a Bot Be Gone t-shirt. It supports this channel. It helps us to keep this thing running. And not only that, 10% of the profits go to United 24. They are Gildan made, 100% US cotton, great shirts, wonderful shirts. We've had many people saying these are the best shirts they've ever worn, and they really are. They're great shirts. I'm wearing an LSA shirt right now, which is also made by the exact same manufacturer as this, and it is absolutely incredible. If you want one, all you have to do is go to officialenforcerstore.com, link in the description below, and get yourself one. They come in multiple sizes from small to 5XL, and they come in multiple colors from black, sand, military green, navy, dark heather, and light pink. So make sure to get one while you can, because this limited edition run is going to be ending at the end of this Saturday stream. So the stream before the Sunday night fundraiser, that is going to be the last live stream that you'll be able to get one of these shirts. So make sure to get one while you can, because time is running out. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And thank you, Matthew, for reminding me about that, because while we're talking about new merch ideas, I completely forgot that we still have an ongoing limited edition merch sale. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much for the support, though, Purple Gerbil, and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing a reality, and we will be trying to make the Pimp Marmot into a actual shirt. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Purple Gerbil, who puts in a $20 donation. Huge shout out to the Purple Gerbil for that support. I said, "Can we put an LSA flag on the Kremlin, or is that escalating?"
That would not be escalating for America. It would be escalating for the LSA, because if we're already not on an FSB watch list or a hit list, we certainly will be after that. But I'm fine with that, because we already have lunatics trying to get us every single day. It's kind of a fact of life, so if we add the FSB to the list, I wouldn't be too concerned. And on top of that, we have the backing of the United States government. Huge shout out to all of our folks who are with the U.S. government, who make sure to try and keep us a little bit safer each and every day, as we do appreciate that. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Purple Gerbil. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to CK Bold, who puts in a $10 donation and puts in the regular instead take a live chat question. And of course, we shall take one. And at this live chat question, while the spreadsheet starts acting up significantly, this one is going to go to Kana, who says, did you guys hear about that Russian pilot that leaked info about the bombing of the children's hospital?
I did hear about that. That was very interesting. I didn't really get to look at it too much, but it would be good to know that some Russians have a conscience in the armed forces and want to report things like that. And so it's good to hear that one of them at least had a guilty conscience and decided to come clean about it and talk about it. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support, CK Bold, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Larry Murill, who puts in a $10 donation and says, my question is, any more noise about the Taurus? And also a merch idea, challenge coin, and Marmot one side, LSA the other.
And I thank you so much for the support, Larry Murill. And I think we've looked into doing a challenge coin before. I'm not sure if we found out it was going to be uneconomical or something along those lines, but I think it was going to be a little bit too hard to pull off, and so we had to withdraw from the challenge coin idea, at least temporarily, but we might be able to do it in the future again. Maybe. But that would be a really cool idea. I would love to see a challenge coin, because a lot of y'all love challenge coins. Also, another thing, we haven't gotten a lot more about the Taurus. It seems that the German government isn't a big fan of sending it to Ukraine, and then they kind of left it at that and haven't really circled back and addressed it again. So for now, we know that the Taurus is probably never going to make it into Ukraine. Very, very unfortunate, very annoying. But once again, it's kind of just Germany doing its bureaucratic waffling a little bit. They might send it eventually. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for the support. Thank you, Larry Morrill. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here goes to Benjamin Brasowinski, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Benjamin, as always, for that support. Let me pull up Google Translate, by the way, because I need to be able to translate this into English. Let's see here. Copy, paste. There we go. He says, this only shows the weakness of NATO, just like before the war. Independent nations with divided views, Slavic countries bordering the front line, and an all-powerful America tiptoeing.
And I thank you so much for the support, Benjamin, and that's exactly what I was saying tonight. We can't have this kind of an existence in the Western world. America and I'll say this because this is something that I always see with Americans here in the United States. Everyone wants to say, oh, I love America. It's such a strong country, a powerful country. We are the best in the world. You know, people like to say that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to actually doing anything around the world to make sure that we can keep saying that, then everyone goes, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Warmonger, or better yet, don't escalate. Just give them what they want, or something like that. And then because of that, then they start taking up the opposite stance. Oh, America's a weak country. We can't do that. Let's just back away. Let's just give Putin whatever he wants. Give him parts of Ukraine. Give him all of Ukraine. Just keep him away from us. And it's just silly to watch. It really is, because everyone wants to say America's a strong country, and then no one wants America to be a strong country. And that is something I think is going to have to change if America wants to keep going in the future and wants to make sure that not only ourselves but our allies are well taken care of and that our sphere continues to press on. We're going to have to change that. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Benjamin. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one is going to go to Ben Ite, who puts in a $10 donation. And huge shout out to Ben for that support.
Hey!
He said, any word on North Korean casualties? Hell, the Russians have probably killed as many as the Ukraine army around the campfire.
From what we understand, Ben, we don't think the North Koreans are there yet. So from what we know, there's probably no casualties, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of them that end up getting whacked by the Russians before they even fight the Ukrainians. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are moving on to the next one. Games Green Coffee said, U.S. has become a paper tiger. No, we haven't. We are a full-fledged, strong. We are the strongest country in every single metric in the world. That there is no contest to that. By the statistics, by the numbers, we are the strongest. Like even right now, people want to say, like, for example, oh, you know, the United States isn't meeting recruitment quotas. We still have the strongest military in the world, qualitatively, not quantitatively. China actually would have the largest at that point, just by raw numbers of service members. But the United States has the largest qualitatively, by far. We have the largest economy by far as well. Even if people want to say things like inflation appears to be on the rise, even still, the American economy is the largest. Back in the day when the Great Depression happened in the United States, from 1929 through the 1930s, America still had, although we were in the middle of a depression, the largest economy in the world, which is something that a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people didn't know this either. During the U.S. Civil War, the United States of America, before the Civil War, actually had one of the largest economies in the world. America has always been an incredibly large economic powerhouse, even through incredible times of danger and tumult, like the Depression and the Civil War. But at the same time, the thing is that back in the day, either America was an isolationist country, up till about World War II, and then afterwards we weren't an isolationist country. We were very forward. We were the leader of the sphere, and so we had to take on the duties of the leader of the sphere, and that's why we ended up getting involved in all kinds of wars that a lot of people in America don't understand why we were there, like Korea or Vietnam or Iraq and Afghanistan. Those wars have nothing to do with us, but they have everything to do with upkeeping and maintaining our sphere of influence and our way of life. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that, is that the reason why America lives in a time right now of such great prosperity is because we make sure to fight and defend the very areas of the world that we trade with and make money with that allow us the kind of prosperity that we have right now. If we didn't fight and constantly send some of our young men to die in these foreign, faraway places, America wouldn't be in the position it is now. Think about it. Many countries have gone the way of the dodo, like the Soviet Union. And a lot of their guys went and fought and died in World War II. Not a lot of them went and fought and died after. The Soviet Union was a pretty non-reactive force even when it came to anything going on around the world. The only war they got involved in was Afghanistan after World War II that was on any major scale where they directly did something. And even then, that didn't bode that well for them. And of course, the Soviet public didn't understand why in the world would we have to be fighting a war for a sphere of influence that we have. That doesn't make any sense because no one explained to them. Of course, in World War II, they were forced to fight to create the Warsaw Pact in the Soviet sphere. But afterwards, no one explained to the Soviet people, you have to fight to maintain the sphere. And because of that, and also because of economic decline, because of stagnation, and a million other reasons, they collapsed. And that is just how the world works. A lot of people don't get that. Like, a lot of people say this in a negative connotation nowadays. I don't want to die for an oil company. The truth is that the oil company, like people don't get this. The oil companies are brutally important right now. If no one wants to die for the oil company, guess what, pal? The gas prices are going up. And there's nothing you can really do about it at that point, rather than bitch and moan, like a lot of people like to do. Everyone goes, I don't want to die for an oil company. And then when the gas prices rises, because the American government kind of gets the idea, the public wouldn't be that big behind fighting and dying for an oil company. So we'll just let whatever happen and the price will rise. And then everyone wants to bitch and moan, oh, the prices are rising. Well, that's because, guess what? We're not defending our sphere. No one's fighting and dying for the oil companies, and everything's going to get more expensive because the other guys, the Chinese and the Russians, are getting the oil and gas for cheaper because they're willing to fight and die for it. That's how the world works. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Benjamin. A very interesting point. And I don't mean to put it as brutally or as aloof as that, but that is really the honest reality underlying everything right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, Matthew has told me that we will have to, I love my advisors, but they just keep tacking stuff to the schedule. I've been told that we have about 20 super chats left. And so we are going to have to be speeding up just a little bit so that way we can make sure to get to some live chats too. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Ari Sowini, who's a longtime channel legend, who puts in a $20 donation. Huge shout out to Ari for that support, and it said LSA.
LSA, baby, and thank you so much, Ari Sweeney, Kiwi Wife and Finn for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one is going to go to Adam McLean, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Adam, for that support. He said, what are the complications involved with the U.S. telling Putin, if you ever attack Kyiv, that's where we draw the line?
I would say, let's see here. 1 second. Sorry, I had to address someone because I think they thought I was getting angry. I wasn't getting angry at all. Can you reread that one again, Matthew?
They said, let's see, this one went to Adam. He said, what are the complications involved with the U.S. telling Putin, if you ever attack Kyiv, that's where we draw the line?
The complications is that we can start getting a little bit too directly involved in the war, because technically in a war, nothing's off the table. Ukraine can attack Moscow, the city, quite easily, and Russia can attack Kyiv. The thing is the use of weaponry. Like, if Russia was to, well, let's say, if the Chinese were to use if the Russians were to use Chinese weapons on Kyiv, that would start to make a diplomatic incident where Ukraine could say China was involved in the war. Then we could step in and say, Russia, if you use any Chinese weapons in the war, we're going to take that as China's getting involved and we're going to take direct action against China in some form. And then China would go, you better not shoot those at Kyiv. That's something we could do. But trying to dictate how Russia can fight the war using their own weapons on Ukraine, that starts to enter a territory where we're pretty much getting directly involved in the war in a way, instead of kind of supporting Ukraine but not being directly involved as an actual belligerent. I think that's about the best way I could explain that right there. It's a bit of a, actually, it's a very complex question, but I hope that is a good enough answer that hopefully makes sense. So with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Butchie777, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Butchie, for that support. And I don't see a comment attached to it. But of course, Butchie, you've been around for ages. And thank you very much for always supporting the channel through and through. And we appreciate it very much. And we also have a $10 super chat from Rob S., who says, thanks for all you guys do. And thank you, Rob.
And thank you so much, Rob, for enjoying what we do. And thank you for supporting it, because you're helping it to be possible day in and day out. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Russ Rizzo, who puts in a $10 donation and says, marmots are susceptible to infection by bubonic plague. Ooh. And marmots in the Ural Mountains are believed to have served as host for a bubonic plague epidemic striking Russia at the end of the 19th century.
Dang, I actually did not know that. And I thank you for sharing that with us. I did not know that the marmot could be the bringer of death, but nevertheless, it is. And I think that is a good unofficial symbol for the Lee Spring Army, because the official symbol is actually the honey badger. But I think the marmot is a very good one as well. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Russ Rizzo, and throwing in an incredibly cool historical fact right there. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And this one is going to go to Cody Wilson, who puts in a 10 and says, always learn new things here, and thanks.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Cody Wilson. I'm glad that you do learn new things here, and I'm glad that my rabbit holes end up being educational in some way, hopefully. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. No problem at all, Cody Wilson. We're always happy to have you here, and thank you so much for enjoying the channel. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Duncan VR, who put in a 10, and he has those animal noises yet again. He says, Bob Woof, here's my dinner money, meow woof, quack. He said, if I was the president, I wouldn't be, you know, doing a little sleepy sleep. And let Ukraine get those bases. Baba. Cult of Matt or Cult of Enforcer? Baba Baba.
It's not a cult. But still, thank you so much for support, Duncan VR, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, look, I sometimes I have to sleep. But still, thank you so much once again for throwing in the animal noises and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible. And with that, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Juha Peltonen, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much for the support as well. They said, when F-16s arrive, do you think their role will be more offensive or defensive? And my opinion is definitely, because there is not so many and even less pilots.
I would say that they're probably going to use them in a mixed way. I would actually have to say, to be honest, their initial actions are probably going to be offensive actions against enemy radar sites, because that is the first ability that Ukraine will get to do that, and the F-16 is the only aircraft capable of that currently in the Air Force of Ukraine. So I think they'll be used at the beginning offensively, and then later on they might end up getting used in a mixed combination of offensive actions and defensive actions, depending on the sorties and missions that they require. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, Juha Peltonen, and thank you so much for throwing in a very interesting question right there. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
And up next, huge shout out to Mark-Andre Burnett, who put in a $5 donation. And Mark, thank you very much as well. I think you threw in a 5 last night also without a comment. So a huge shout out for the continued support, and we appreciate it very much. And we also have a 5 from On the Rocks and In the Soil. Michael Michael Godbold, I think is how it said. I was having to struggle with that one. But Michael says, for the non-Chipotle fund. And I agree, for the non-Chipotle fund, because the Chipotle fund, the fund for people, is no longer. It has gone by the wayside, very happily so, and I won't be touching Chipotle for years to come. I have to say, I won't be touching that stuff. It was a rough day yesterday, and I'm glad it's all over, but thank you very much for that support as well, Michael Godbold. And we also have a 5 from Wapalong Cassidy, who says, so who's ready to be drafted in World War III? It's about avoiding an escalation.
Thank you so much for the support, Wapalong Cassidy. And if a conflict did begin, and I was drafted, that is what it is. A large majority of our viewer base doesn't really have to worry that much about being drafted. Matthew and me actually would. And considering that I have double major scoliosis, I probably would not make it through medical examinations, because technically, from what I understand, I can't even enlist right now with a waiver or commission with a waiver. I just can't. It's just too severe of a curvature of the spine. But later on in the war, they will probably change the draft requirements, and then I'd also get drafted as well. But that is just a fact of life. That is a part of being in the United States and having to know that this country is the leader of a world sphere, is that sometimes you have to fight in wars to make sure that America and the rest of its sphere of influence in the Western world can continue to stand on top. Sometimes little people like Matthew and me will have to make sacrifices to be able to make sure that the entirety of the nation, the countless hundreds of millions of people who live here, and the countless billions who live in the Western Sphere can continue to live on the great, amazing lives that they have. That's just a part of being here and a part of our responsibility of a sort. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for support, Wapalong Cassidy. And with that, also, Matthew, did you see that bot from earlier? Did you see that bot? Cosmic Harmony. European colonizers in North America ought to migrate back to Europe and fight Russia. Stop hiding on native land. Cowards. Isn't Russia isn't most of Russia like native lands of other people that they colonize? Like, isn't that the whole area beyond the Urals? Because it is. Like,
exactly.
I mean, that's not a rhetorical question. It is. So who the hell is Russia to say that? They are the largest country in the world by landmass. They control 15% of the surface of the earth. Most of that was colonized and is actually land of ethnic peoples that aren't even Russians. And yet you want to say that we need to go back to Europe because we're the colonizers? Get the hell out of here. It's like that. It's ridiculous. But anyways, that's like the pot calling the kettle black right there. That is stupid. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Ryan Blackhawk, who put in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, Ryan, for the support. He said, I've been listening for about a week, and you're now my go-to source for info on the Ukraine war. And keep up with the good work.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and the kind words. That is incredibly nice of you. And thank you for really enjoying this channel, Ryan, and really finding it to be worthwhile to support even in just a week. I thank you so much for really appreciating what we do, because we try and make this as best we can every single night. And I thank you for enjoying this massively. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a 5 from Darren Quinn, who says, oh man, let Ukraine have the F-16s as promised. This is extremely disappointing. What has gone wrong with the free world, and are we buckling?
I don't think we're buckling. I think that we're in an age not in an age. We are in a current mindset in the government of weakness. It is something that is permeating all sides, to be entirely honest, whether people want to pretend like it's strongmanisms and then doing weak actions, or just being weak from the outset. It's all weakness. I don't like it. I don't stand for it. This nation should not stand for it, and we should start to try and move move the government through voting into a more amenable kind of a mindset, a nation that actually looks out for itself and its sphere as a whole, instead of just giving away parts of it because it would be too tough to actually stand up for it. It's easier to have no spine than to actually have a backbone, and that's what a lot of people have ended up learning these days. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for support.
And this one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 5 and says, glad that y'all are feeling better. And a Russian plane, I remember thanks to Command and Conquer, Red Alert. Is it the Yak-3 or possibly the Yak-52 and LSA? And thank you for saying that you're glad we're feeling better, Bruce. I'm glad I'm feeling better. Thank you.
And I'm glad I'm feeling better too. And that's the Yak-3. But let's see, the Yak-52, I think that was a trainer. Yak-52. Yeah, that's the trainer plane that the Ukrainians use to shoot down drones. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much for saying that you're glad we're feeling better. I'm so happy that we're feeling better too. And I'm happy that we were able to run a full-length stream that honestly is going to inevitably go overtime tonight. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Gunfox61, who puts in a $5 donation, and huge shout to Gunfox. He said, okay, I'll throw this rabbit hole out there. The Sino-Vietnamese War.
Oh man, Gunfox, I wish I could go into that rabbit hole, but sadly for time constraints tonight, we wouldn't really be able to give it justice. But to quickly give you all a little bit of a rundown, that the Sino-Vietnamese War is a war that happened from 1979 to 1981 in between the People's Republic of China, also called Communist China, and the People's Republic of Vietnam, Communist Vietnam, at the pretty much just years after the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. It ended up resulting in an unconclusive victory for both sides. Neither side really decisively defeated the other. The Chinese actually ended up taking really high casualties, and it made sure that Vietnam economically stayed down for decades. But with that, I hope that does give at least the best overview I can of that conflict. Very interesting one, though, especially considering that it was communists on communists. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, huge shout out to Tamara Buckaloo, who put in a $4 donation, along with Mike Beckberger, who put in a 3. Carl Vincent also put in a 2, along with Mike Beckberger, who put in another 2 once again. And huge shout out to Tamara, Mike, and Carl for that support, and it's appreciated very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to give a huge shout out to y'all as well, Tamara, Mike, Carl, the lot of you. I got to thank the lot of you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a massive thanks to all 3 of y'all for the support and helping this channel to continue to be possible day in and day out. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Zach Dennison. He puts in a 4 and says, what would you pick? Mirage, Gripen, or F-16?
F-16.
Honestly, out of that list right there, if you had no like logistical concerns or any other money concerns or anything like that, like you'd have to go with the F-16, I think. But if you had to concern yourself with, like, for example, Ukraine situation, the Gripen is probably the better choice. But if they can get F-16s faster, whichever one they can get, it doesn't really matter as long as it works. Because Ukraine just needs anything at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say F-16 without a doubt. If you're talking about you want to be economical, go with the Gripen. And then the Mirage is just kind of a good substitute for the F-16 if you didn't have F-16s, because it is very similar in a lot of ways. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for support, Zach Dennison, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a 2 from Uncovered Cube. And huge shout to Uncovered Cube for that. He said, I hope you are doing better. And we are. And LSA.
Hey! And thank you so much for wishing that we were doing better. We are. And, of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you so much once again for support, Uncovered Cube, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is also from Uncovered Cube. But what does it say, Maddie? What does it say?
He said again, another for feeling better. And LSA.
Hey! And thank you so much for another one for feeling better. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last super chat of the night, and then we're going to be moving on into the live chats.
And this one is going to go to LSA Sergeant Figment, who put in a 2 and said, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
And that is an order. Hit the like button. Of course, orders from LSA Sergeant Figment. Actually, a lot of people did tonight. We've gotten 3,000 likes, which is incredibly high. That's actually really, really high. And I got to thank everyone for hitting the like button. If you want to continue to hit the like button, please, by all means. You'll probably have a few more minutes to do so, so do it while you can. And so with that, thank you so much once again, LSA Sergeant Figment, for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the live chats, but due to time constraints tonight, sadly, we will only be able to get to a limited number. We'll get to the Morse code deciphers and 3 live chats. And so what do we got, Matthew?
So the Morse code deciphering group tonight was Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J., Rumpelstiltskin, and also David Millsaps. They said, the Morse code says, Russia's aviation industry is falling apart just like every other, and LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to say, a huge congratulations for y'all getting that correct on the 870th day of the war. Y'all been getting that correct for an unbelievably long amount of time now, and y'all just continue to hammer it home every single night. And so a huge congratulations to y'all. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Jonathan Ochi, who says, wouldn't it be a declaration of war against NATO if Russians are actively attempting to sabotage NATO bases?
You could take it as that, yes. If you were able to find direct Russian involvement, like, for example, if a Russian saboteur was captured, they admitted that they were a Russian saboteur operating on behalf of the FSB, and the Russian Federation's government officially accepted that statement and said, yes, he was one of our operatives, you could easily take that as a direct action by the Russian government and declaration of war, as it is direct hostile action against an opposing party. But if the Russian government denied that that was their saboteur, technically on a diplomatic level, it's really hard to directly connect that to the Russians because they didn't admit to it. And then you're kind of met with a middle ground. So technically, yes, but due to the nuance, most of the time, it most likely would end up being a no. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And a very good question, by the way, Jonathan Ochi. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Peace with War, who says, what type of manpad does Russia field, and is it effective in combat?
They field the Igla primarily. There are a couple of different kinds of manpads that are used, but they use the 9K38 Igla. This is very similar to the Stinger here in the West. It is fairly good. We've actually seen both sides score a couple of kills. Actually, the Russians have scored a small number with the Igla. The Ukrainians have scored an incredibly high number of kills with this Igla, or the Piorin, which is the Polish version of an Igla. But they're actually fairly okay. Manpads in general are pretty much the same across the board in their abilities. All missiles pretty much perform similarly. There's not really that much differentiation amongst them. So, to be quite honest, it's actually not that bad of a manpad. And also, these Iglas also scored a decent amount of kills in the Gulf War as well back in the 90s against coalition aircraft of pretty much all types, even F-15s. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what I understand. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Melinda Grifford Vaughn, who says, what is it going to take for the United States to approve or allow full range or extended range of missiles?
I will be entirely honest. It is going to take a political environment in the United States that will not exist. I hate to say that, and of course I'm not going to get into politics here, but I just don't think that the political conditions in the United States that would allow for that kind of a permission to be granted will ever prevail during the course of this war. I would say, that there would be a logical conclusion, like, for example, a children's hospital getting obliterated by multiple X-101 missiles, or KH-101 missiles. I would say that that would probably have been the catalyst to approve the use of U.S. weapons, long-range weapons inside of Russia, but that didn't change anything. And we know that if things went the opposite way and there was a different administration in charge, that would not change. We would probably see that those weapons would not be permitted to be used deep inside of Russia. So generally, it would the best answer I can give, which is the most unfortunate one, is that there just will not be an existent kind of a political environment in America, no matter what direction it is in or is going in, that would allow for that to happen. So regardless of any kind of action that would happen, the atmosphere in America, at least in the government, just would not exist for the approval to ever be given. And so will that. On that unfortunate note, on that unfortunate answer, it is time for us to end. I got to thank everyone so much once again for watching tonight. 65,000 people have watched this live stream since it started. And at the peak, there was about probably 8.1 thousand of y'all here, although YouTube's telling me 7.1 right now. They'll update that tomorrow and it'll be like 8.2 or something like that. We are, of course, entirely honored and grateful to have each and every single one of y'all here every single night. Y'all aren't just numbers, and of course I belt off those numbers at the end of every single night. Y'all are individual people, just like the amazing folks that I'm seeing in the live chat right now. And we are always very honored and very humbled that y'all choose this stream to come to every single night to be able to get y'all's news on the war of Ukraine and news from around the rest of the world whenever it happens. Of course, if you did enjoy and you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. It makes us very happy when folks do. And of course, we will be running the stream tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
All right, and with that, folks, thank you all for another great stream. And of course, also, by the way, I see someone here in the live chat, Hot Dog Warrior, said, I'm in the burrito business now, and got you, Forster Brooks. Whoever did that, that's funny. I like that. But anyways, we'll see you all tomorrow night for the next nightly war news stream, and also midday as well, if there's enough news to cover midday tomorrow. And tomorrow, I believe, is maybe the Enforcer's Day, I think. But whoever it is, we'll see you tomorrow as well. But with that, Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.